I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the statement of values. Secretary Boozer, could you please read for the record?
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interests of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All of this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you, Secretary Boozer. Please have a seat. We will do the roll call. Elizabeth?
Sure. Commissioner Bhatnagar?
Present.
Commissioner Biagini?
Present.
Chair Kuru?
Here.
Commissioner Wang has notified us he's unable to attend. Commissioner Booza?
Present.
Commissioner Salame?
Here.
Commissioner Crutchlow?
Here.
Thank you.
We do need a motion to excuse Commissioner Wang with an vote by this commission.
So moved to excuse Commissioner Huang.
Seconded.
We have a motion by Commissioner Biagini, seconded by Commissioner Bhatnagar.
Commissioner Booza, are you able to record your vote? Thank you. Thank you, and the motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. We now move to the declaration of commission procedures. Secretary Booza.
Public hearings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the commission directs all activities during the hearing. All comments shall be addressed to the commission. Any items of this agenda may be continued to a subsequent hearing. Applicants will be allotted up to 10 minutes to present and justify proposals following staff presentation of the item. Other speakers will be given up to 2 minutes. The applicant is allowed up to 5 minutes for rebuttal of any comments. No additional comments will be accepted upon the close of the public hearing, although the commission reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. Special procedures, time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. Appeal of commission actions must be filled in writing within 7 calendar days.
Thank you. Copies of current agenda and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available from the Planning Division office on the Friday afternoon preceding the meeting and available always online. Continuances and exceptions. This part of the meeting allows for applicants, members of the public, or other interested parties to request an item to be 1, continued without hearing, 2, withdrawn, or 3, taken out of order. Staff or members of the commission, are there any requests from applicants, public, or commission members for a continuance or exception for any items on tonight's agenda?
We have no items.
Seeing no request, we will now move to making the general announcement that the Planning Commission has 7 members. Whenever the full commission is not present, applicants have the option to continue their item to another meeting. Today, we do have a full quorum. We are 6 out of 7, but is there any members who would like to still request for a continuance? No. Okay. Moving to consent calendar. Secretary Boozer, please read for procedures for consent calendar.
The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted, approved, or adopted by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. If any member of the Planning Commission, staff, or the applicant or a member of the public wishes to comment on a consent calendar item or would like the item to be heard on the regular agenda, make this request now. Items listed on the consent calendar with associate file numbers constitute public hearing items.
And tonight's consent calendar item includes the Special Planning Commission meeting minutes of January 24th, 2024. So do we have a motion?
I'd like to make second.
Who was the originator of the motion? Commissioner Biagini, and seconded by Commissioner Boozer. We have a verbal vote from Commissioner Salim. It's okay.
Thank you. The motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the order of public presentations. This part of the item is for members of the public who would like to address this commission for any item not on tonight's agenda. So this is like a moment for you, any member of the public, online or in the chambers, to address the commission on any items. Know that we will not be able to discuss the items without it getting formally agendized, and will need to check in with staff prior to agendizing and for further discussion. Any members? Online?
I have no hands online.
Seeing none, we now move to the public hearing items for tonight's meeting. We have 3 public hearing items. The first one being the public hearing related to the rezone request from MP, Planned Industrial, to HORD, High Intensity Office / R&D, for the properties located at 2421, 2431, 2441, and 2451 Mission College Boulevard. We'll open with staff presentation.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Leslie Xavier, I'm the planning manager, and I'll be giving you the presentation this evening for this item. The item you have before you today, as you mentioned, is a rezoning request from MP Planned Industrial to HORD, High Intensity Office R&D, for the properties located at 241, 2431, 2441, and 2451 Mission College Boulevard. The zoning map is up on the screen for you, and the properties, which there are 3 parcels, are highlighted in blue. The site is approximately 20 acres in size. It's located on the north side of Mission College Boulevard, with San Thomas Aquino Creek to the east and Great America Parkway to the west. The site is developed with 4, 2, and 3-story office buildings, surface parking lot, and perimeter landscaping. For a little context, this is in northern Santa Clara. It's right adjacent to Great America, as well as our fire station number 8. To the south of the site is the Santa Clara Park Office Park. South and west of the site is the Santa Clara Marriott. And then further west across Great America Parkway is Mission College. And then up in the northern western corner is our Patrick Henry specific plan area. So just kind of giving you a flavor of where this site is in context to the city. So again, this is a rezone from our MP Planned Industrial to HORD. This request is consistent with the site's high-intensity office R&D general plan land use designation. And while the City Council has recently adopted our zoning code update, they have not yet taken action on the map. So the next step for the city would be to apply the new zoning districts from the code update to our zoning map. That is not done at this time. So the applicant is, simply requesting to go ahead of the city process. They can move a little faster so that they may take advantage of re-tenanting the building. 3 of the office buildings are currently vacant, and they do have a tenant ready to move in. The rezoning of this would allow for that tenant to move forward with tenant improvements through our building permit process. So with that, we are asking the Planning Commission to determine that the project falls within the scope of the December 19th, 2023 addendum to the General Plan EIR, and adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve the rezoning from MP Planned Industrial to HORD, High Intensity Office R&D. And the applicant does not have a presentation this evening, but is available should you have any questions, as am I.
Thank you, Leslie. Would the commission like to ask staff any questions related to the presentation? Leslie, could you go back to the zoning plan? The previous slide that showed the adjacencies?
The context?
The context?
Yeah.
Thank you. So just trying to hone down, where is the Patrick Henry Drive project?
So Patrick Henry is right up here in this sort of teal. It's this area.
It's right across.
Oh, you can't see my cursor, so sorry.
It's the blue dot.
The sort of teal in the top left corner.
Top left, got it,
Yeah.
okay. And that is a mixed use?
That is correct.
which has residences as well as,
As ground floor commercial mostly, but yes.
and how many homes are we expecting on that?
Oh, goodness. Tough question. I can look it up for you.
Okay, I'm not trying to intentionally trick anyone here. I just want to bring the context of the reasonable, not necessarily close proximity from a residential standpoint, and just leave it at that. So I appreciate this location context map. Any other questions of staff before we then allow the applicant to be present? Commissioner Salem?
Madam Chair, the Assistant City Attorney over here quickly pulled up the number of units for Patrick Henry, and it's 12,000.
12,000?
Yeah,
Okay.
the maximum.
Okay, thank you, everyone. 12,000, that's it. Commissioner Salem?
Has the review of the current infrastructure in relation to the expected new density been completed? Are we supplying enough water, power, sewage to that site?
The new density for the Patrick Henry specific plan?
Well, no, for this, I assume that the change in the zoning for this is going to mean an increase.
So they're just going to re-tenant the existing office
Okay,
buildings
good.
with a new tenant, medical uses that are a permitted use, but in the high-intensity office R&D, not in the site's current MP planned residential. So it's consistent with the general plan, what they want to do, but yeah,
Okay, so it's not a change in occupancy?
no. Well, not in density.
Good, thank you.
Just to follow through on that question, when we're talking HORD, what's the permitted uses that this district allows?
There's a number, office campuses, research and development, everything that you would sort of already see in northern Santa Clara currently.
Data centers?
I would like to fact check that one.
Okay, let's just get
I
a
think
quick
maybe it's
back end.
low-intensity office R&D data centers are allowed in. I think high-intensity, they have to be a data center for the office itself, not a standalone
So
data
it's an
center.
ancillary.
Yeah, so ancillary data centers in this for the use is permitted, but not a standalone.
Okay. And the current infrastructure to this property, 4 buildings, albeit I'm assuming they're just 4 buildings, if I'm seeing the visual correctly, is going to, at the time of its future development, will have its own assessment on its
Right,
infrastructure.
oh yes, redevelopment of the property, yes, would go through our process.
We'll come back here to the Planning Commission?
Depending on what they want to do.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
It may or
Safe
may not.
answer.
It might be a director-level decision.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions from members of commission to staff before we open again for applicant to
Yeah,
Commissioner Critchler?
how many acres is this?
It's a 20-acre site, little over 20 acres.
20 acres, and it is going to be used for residential at some point, is the idea?
No. This is high-intensity office research and development.
Okay, just high-intensity office, and you said the maximum could be 12,000?
No, what we were talking about is the Patrick Henry specific plan, which is in the northwestern corner of this context map. That is planned for 12,000 units in that particular area. So that's a specific plan that's approved in converting office industrial space into a residential neighborhood.
Okay, I feel better now. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Boozer?
Did you mention that it was going to be medical? They wanted to bring medical? Is it a hospital, like a satellite hospital?
Doctor's offices.
Okay, so medical
We
and
don't know
dental then?
yet, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay, so it makes sense.
This is a tenant that the property owner would like to move in.
Okay, so that's what it's going to be. Okay, so it's not going to be affiliated with Kaiser or any of the El Camino or any of the
I don't, I
hospital?
will let the applicant answer that question.
Okay,
I don't-
all right. It makes sense since you're going to have that many units, residential units, to have a medical
Medical
staff close by.
services?
Yeah.
Thank you again. Any other questions from members of commission before I open it up for the applicant? Okay, applicant, I understand you don't have a presentation. Technically, you have 10 minutes. But are there any questions to the applicant that commission would like to? Would the applicant still like to make any verbal presentation? Okay, saying no, nothing of interest?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if the
Luana?
applicant wants to raise their hand online,
Okay,
I don't actually see their name.
Yeah, I can ask a question here.
yeah, Commissioner Bhatnagar has a question, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So the site seems quite large for just a set of medical offices. Is there a plan in mind? I mean, you have four-story buildings that exist out there. It doesn't seem like you'll need that for a set of clinics and things like that, right? Are there any specific plans that you might want to share?
I can say, I mean, there's 4 office buildings currently. 1 is occupied, 3 are vacant. They have a tenant that would like to take 3 of the buildings, and that's why they're asking to rezone the property to allow this tenant to move in. I do not see the applicant online at this time.
So I'm going to just hypothesize here and hope the applicant and the staff are considering the comments. Going to high intensity and R&D seems viable as it aligns more specifically with our actual amended general plan or our readopted general plan, and our new zoning ordinance will come to catch up with the actual zoning very soon, understanding that there is a vertical discrepancy, what we call between a general plan and a zoning ordinance discrepancy with the current.
There's currently a discrepancy.
Correct. And so this recommendation by staff will put them more aligned, knowing that their future project will need to come back in some form or manner for approval, whatever the plan be. Again, it's some form of discretionary until it's deemed ministerial.
Right, unless, yeah, I
Okay.
don't think it'd be ministerial. If they're going to demolish and rebuild, it would not be ministerial.
Okay, so it'll come through some
At
form of
least not
review.
in this world today. Laws may change, I can't suppose.
Okay, so our understanding of what it can be will always be arbitrary, so I don't want to contemplate and put something on record that's not real, so let's not ruminate on what it possibly could be until we see for facts what the real project is. With that and not seeing, I'll open it for public comments as this project will allow. Are there any members of the public who'd like to address for this topic? Online?
I see no hands online.
Okay. Seeing none in the chambers or online, I'd like to have a motion to close public comment.
Motion to close public comment?
Seconded.
I have a motion by Commissioner Biagini, seconded by Commissioner Bhatnagar. Verbal motion by Commissioner Lance as a yes. Thank you. And now we will open to commission deliberation on this project. Any questions, concerns, thoughts? Last words? Famous last words.
Do we know who the existing tenant is or what type of
The
business?
building, the existing tenant? I don't recall, I'm sorry.
The current use, you're asking,
Yeah, that one
mostly?
It's an office use.
Okay.
Somebody Google the address. Might pull up at least
Which address?
anyone.
Any of the
Did we hear that the other buildings are vacant and only one is occupied? 3 are vacant, so, okay. We might have to do a random lottery on that one for what's the current, but maybe a quick follow-up whenever staff has an answer.
I was just wondering whether that's consistent or adjacent in terms of business with the clinic, or might there be some conflict? Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, and,
not, then that's fine.
you know, in the current market, the way with commercial real estate is really good that they have tenants that were willing to come in and do something. So, really great.
Okay, while staff can pull that up at leisure, are there any other questions before I move on? Okay, I'd like to have the commission take a motion on the item, the recommendation, if staff would like to bring it up, I can also.
I'd ask for 2 motions, please.
So the first one is to determine that the project falls within the scope, am I reading it right, of the December 19 to 2023 addendum to the general plan EIR, which I'm assuming you're referencing that the general plan EIR is consistent, although I've not reviewed it, so I'm going to plead.
Right, the December addendum that found that the adoption of the zoning code fell within the scope of the 2010-2035 general plan.
Okay,
And now you're finding that this project falls within the scope of that addendum.
got it. And with the already set assumptions that there are no new identified impacts through this project.
Right, this is just a part of the remapping
Zoning.
that accompanies the adoption of the zoning code.
Got it. So do we have a motion from the commission members
So moved on recommendation number 1,
that the project falls within the scope?
Second it.
within the scope of the December 19th, 2023 addendum to the general plan DIR.
And seconded by Commissioner Salem?
Thank you. The motion passed. Thank you.
And the second motion is to adopt a resolution recommending the city council approve a rezone from MP, planned industrial, to now HORD, high intensity office / R&D, that also aligns with the general plan designation.
Move to adopt the resolution recommending the city council approve a rezone from MP planned industrial to HORD, high intensity office / R&D.
Thank you, Commissioner Crutchlow. We have a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Biagini. Oh, that went fast. I hope to get out at an early hour today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if you're interested, NVIDIA leases the other building.
Okay. Okay, and I'm surprised that we look at medical clinics. Okay.
Commissioner Botnick, can you cast your vote, please? Thank you. And the motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, staff, for the presentation, albeit brief and succinct and effective. Thank you. And we look forward to the zoning maps coming. Is there a general understanding of what timeline we have on that?
It should be around April, March.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, so soon, but
There we go.
but not soon enough.
not soon enough.
Got it. Moving, yes. Sure. So with a brief time for Commissioner Biagini to join, I'll move on. Public hearing item now for an action on the environmental impact report, the general plan amendment, and use permit to allow the construction of a new 4-story, 244,068 square feet data center with a substation at 2805 Bowers Avenue. Staff, do we have a presentation?
Wait. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Nimisha Agrawal, Senior Planner, and I will be presenting this item. I'm going to share my screen. So the request before you is for the environmental impact report and a mitigation monitoring and reporting program prepared by California Energy Commission, the general plan amendment from high intensity office research and development to light industrial, and use permit to allow the demolition of an existing building to construct a 244,068 square feet data center with a substation and site improvements. Highlighted in red here on the right is the project site. It's a 5.12 acre site located on the east side of Bowers Avenue, sort of at the intersection of Mead Avenue. The general plan is high-intensity office and R&D, and the zoning is light industrial. It is currently populated with a two-story building, about 100,487 square feet, with surface parking lot and perimeter landscaping. So to give you a context of the location and the uses surrounding this site, in green is the substation, is the SVP substation located here. Purple are the data centers located in the vicinity. The orange or the darker yellow is the office and industrial uses, and there is a commercial K1 speed across the street from Bowers Avenue. The nearest residential is located to the southwestern corner, west of Bowers and south of the Caltrans right-of-way. It's about 500 feet away. Is side-by-side zoning and general plan. Again, highlighted in red is the project site. We see the surrounding sites have similar high-intensity office and R&D or light industrial designation. The zoning surrounding the surrounding parcels have similarly zoned light industrial. Here is the picture of the street view of the site. The first picture here shows the existing two-story office building. And here is a street view looking north. And the last picture here is looking south. We see there is existing mature landscaping in the area. The proposal, the project is to construct a 4-story data center with a height of 84.5 feet. The total area will be 244,068 square feet at an FAR of 1.03. It includes a substation with a capacity of 72 megavolt ampere. The project will include 32 Tier 4 renewable diesel-fired emergency backup generators with an aggregate capacity of 72 megawatts, and they are located to the eastern side of the project in an exterior generator yard, which is enclosed with a 43 feet high perforated metal screen with a sound attenuation blanket. The project also has 42 air-cooled rooftop chillers, and they are also located behind a 15-foot high mechanical screen that has sound attenuation blanket. A total of 62 surface parking spaces are provided, meeting the requirements of the code. And the project will remove 48 trees and plant 91 36-inch or 48-inch box trees. Here is the site plan. So this is the north. The substation is located to the southern portion of the site to connect with the existing SVP substation located adjacent to the site. The generator yard is located away from the street. This is Bowers Avenue. The site is accessed through two driveways, here and here. And the 4-story data center building is centrally located on the side with a setback of 60 feet over here to about 108 feet over here. Here are some renderings. This middle picture here is the data center looking south. And then this picture shows the generator yard or the exterior yard. And then this is a picture from the street. And here is a close-up rendering of the building. The project, as I mentioned earlier, the site has a general plan designation of high-intensity office and R&D. That is intended for high-rise campus-type development. It allows data center only as a as an associate or subordinary use to the primary use. It does not allow the standalone data centers. And so the applicant is requesting a general plan amendment to light industrial, which allows a standalone data center. The proposed FAR of 1.03 exceeds the maximum allowance of 0.6 in the light industrial designation. However, data centers FAR policies are intended to be to regulate the land uses and their environmental impact, resulting in such as the increase in the vehicle miles traveled. Data centers, because of their low intensity use and would not increase the number of employees or the increase in the significantly increase the vehicle miles traveled, and therefore an exceeding FAR is not. It should be okay. The project is also consistent with several general plan policies, which promote utilizing and improving underutilized property, strengthen the existing tax base, and invest in the public services and infrastructure by providing on-site and off-site improvements. So this site is zoned light industrial and is requesting a use permit. As you're aware, recently, Council adopted the updated zoning code in December of last year. That will be effective February 8th of this year. However, it has the provision that applications that were complete prior to the effective date will be considered under the classic code or the older code. The zoning district light industrial under the classic code does not list data centers as an allowed use. Also, per section 18.60.050, it requires the backup installation of electric power plants, including backup generators, requires a conditional use permit. And therefore, the applicants are requesting a use permit here. Staff reviewed the project and found it to be consistent with the zoning regulations in the ML zoning district. And it is also compatible with the adjacent land uses and maintains the industrial character of the area. And therefore, recommend approval of the use permit. As for CEQA, California Energy Commission is the lead agency for any development projects involving a power plant with the capacity to generate 50 megawatts or more electricity. This project has generators that the aggregate capacity is 72 megawatts, and therefore it requires approval by the CEC. CEC has prepared an environmental impact report and MMRP in accordance with the CEQA. And CEC has the option of formally certifying the project, or they can issue a SPPE, which is small power plant exemption, yeah. And so this CEC has issued a small power plant exemption for this project. As a responsible agency, the city is required to accept the EIR and adopt the MMRP prepared by the CEC, or propose its own analysis, CEQA analysis. Staff has reviewed the EIR prepared by the CEC and found it to be find that it has proposed the appropriate mitigation measures, and therefore recommend accepting the EIR. So with that, the recommendation is to adopt a resolution for Planning Commission to adopt a resolution accepting the environmental impact report prepared by the California Energy Commission and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council approve the general plan amendment from high-intensity office R&D to light industrial, subject to findings, and adopt a resolution approving the use permit for the demolition of the existing building and construction of a new 4-story, 244,068 square foot data center with a substation and site improvements in the light industrial zone property at 2805 Bowers Avenue, subject to findings and conditions of approval. Thank you. That concludes the staff presentation. The applicant team is here in person and online to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Thank you, staff. I'll first have commission members have questions for staff now. Do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner Boozer?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
When they did the CAC report, and were they aware that you're about 1/10 of a mile from a school, elementary school? And 1/10 of a mile of also residential on both sides, one side of Bowers, and then on the, are they aware of that? You have Bracker School. That's exactly 1/10, or one block from what they were proposing that, right after you cross over the underpass. Are they aware of that?
Commissioner Booza, the CEC prepared an environmental impact report for this project. The environmental impact report specifically identified Bracker Elementary School as being located 1,400 feet southeast of the project boundary. So yes.
So it's okay for them to accept that in a school, and also residential. You have also residential there. Actually, it's closer. The residential is actually closer than the school.
The CEC did an analysis and concluded that with imposition of mitigation measures, the environmental impacts would be less than significant. That doesn't speak to your policy decision on whether or not this is appropriate for the site.
Right,
But the
I think-
CEC concluded there's no environmental
Right.
impact.
How can we go back and have them relook at this? Because it doesn't look like they took into consideration really all those factors.
They absolutely did take that into
With
consideration.
blindfolds on, or?
Commissioner Boozer, I think that,
I know, yeah,
I know we are trying to
I know. I'm
convey
trying,
a
but
point, but
yeah, right, but it's,
okay,
you know where I'm coming from.
understood. Any other questions to staff that pertain to what was presented? I will go. Just for clarity, a couple of questions from a fact. Is and I'm referring to a particular page, is the acreage 5.12 or 5.20? Because it says existing 5.12 and proposed 5.20. I'm assuming it's a typo, but let's clarify for the record.
I should have mentioned, the existing site is 5.12. However, the applicant is proposing a lot line adjustment to include about 3,500 square feet of the adjacent parcel, which will be processed by this administratively by the city engineer and will result in a total site acre of 5.20.
Okay. Please keep that in mind that that's relevant for Planning Commission, so I'd appreciate the lot line adjustment information coming here as to where that actual boundaries are that are being adjusted. Can you point on the aerial?
Yes, I can.
And while staff is also pulling the second question, while CEC acknowledges that the proposed project is for a data center, can you confirm if their purview is really around the substation versus the actual data center? What's their actual purview over? As an energy commission, they seem to have focused on the substation and the data center, bringing the substation project forward. Is there any comments about the data center per se, or the aesthetics or other impacts associated with the data center component? I know they built the substation as their main project.
Right, and Madam Chair, just for terminology, I think what we're actually speaking about are the backup generators. That's different from a substation. I think most of their analysis was about the backup generators, which constitutes a power plant. And because it's above 50 megawatts, they are the licensing authority for the power plant.
Backup generators as a source of power.
Right. So their EIR absolutely looks at the data center. It would be illegal piecemealing if they just
Yeah.
only looked at the batteries and not the data center. I can't speak to.
Understood.
What-
And so is the substation a separate component of it? Is the substation part of the project or from an EIR perspective?
Yes,
It is?
yeah, and that
And the
too is
substation generates how much power?
72 megavolt
Ampere,
amperes,
yes, that's megavolt amperes, yeah.
MVA.
Understood. So
MVA.
the substation is the main source of power. The backup generators, the diesel generators, of course, are. How many diesel generators are proposed?
There are 32 Tier 4 renewable diesel-fired emergency backup generators.
And the sound attenuation blanket is around the substation and the generators.
It is around I will pull up the site plan.
Yeah.
So it is around the generator yard and also on the rooftop, the cooler towers that are located on the rooftop, there is a
Got it.
screen that has the sound attenuation.
So just to confirm, the one on the rooftop is 15 feet high,
Correct.
and the one on the ground is 43 feet high.
That is correct.
Do we have aerials? I mean, do we have like perspectives of it? Just for context. And the adjoining, the property that's to the west of generator, I mean, how do I put this? To the
East?
so yeah, east. What is that property there from a location?
It is an industrial building.
So technically, it's like a 43-foot fence.
Right, but it is, yes, it is a 43-foot high fence, and there is a rendering here showing, this is the generator yard, and showing the fence, basically.
And what's the property behind again?
The property behind it is fronting Walsh, this over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And we have more data centers here.
That's an
but This
office.
is an industrial building.
So that's an office.
It's more of an industrial building. There are some office component, but it is primarily an industrial building. It is built as an, yeah.
Okay. How many stories is that building? Commissioner Boozer, hold on. How many stories is that building?
The building,
The office building.
okay. Yeah, there's mostly, yeah, 2 stories. I will have to look that up to confirm.
Okay. And just to confirm, the data center, that's the Tesla Service Center? Or the Vantage Data Center, how tall are they?
So data center, this is the data center,
Yeah.
Vantage Data Center. Tesla Service Center, actually, though it shows up here, it's actually located
I
over
see,
here.
got it. Okay, so the Vantage Data Center, how tall are they?
Yeah. This is a taller building, at least 5-story. I would have to again check.
It's a 5-story?
Yeah, I think this one is taller. I believe this one is not as tall, so it's yeah. Yeah,
And the property to the north is also an office, how tall is it?
it's again a 2-story building.
Okay,
And it shows in it's pretty similar to the existing building on the side in terms of architecture.
got it. So within the proximity of this property, how many buildings that are within visibility as tall as this proposed building? Off of Bowers, off of Walsh, and I don't know what the street.
Along Bowers, we don't have, we have mostly 2-story buildings in this stretch.
Okay,
But on Walsh, we have more taller buildings that are visible from Bowers.
Okay, so you can, from the intersection of Bowers and I don't know the cross street that's residential, you can technically see the Vantage Data Center building.
Yes, likely, portion of it.
Okay.
There is a great difference between the residential here, it's more elevated, versus the Bowers Avenue here kind of goes, there's a great difference between them.
Okay.
So you only see, even though this is a 4-story and the other bit taller buildings, they don't look as tall because,
So the grade is higher on the residential component.
yes.
Beg to differ? Because you're in the top, you go down, and it's actually almost identical
Height?
grade,
Oh,
okay? It's almost identical grade.
okay. And I'm going a little more with an intention here, but how many trees are being removed
There are a total of 48 trees being removed.
and replacement ratio?
The replacement ratio, per general plan, it is 2:1. They are planting 91 trees. There are underground utilities present, so they cannot meet exactly the 2:1 ratio, but they are upsizing the trees to be 36-inch box trees and 48-inch box trees. Additionally, we have a condition for them to plant additional 5 trees off-site.
5 trees off-site and how many on-site again?
91.
Wait, all 91 are the 36 now box inches or 24?
They are a combination of 36 and 48.
And
48
48, wow.
inch box trees, yeah.
And the total is 91 on-site?
Correct.
Wow, okay. Okay, it's hard pressed to see where, I mean, unless you're practically shrouding, and thank you, staff, for that ratio. Those are my technical questions. Any other questions from staff, commission members? Commissioner Salam?
Okay, so what number does this data center bring us up to as far as total number of data centers?
Pick a number. 60?
More like 55, I think it would be the number.
And the estimate of the draw on the available Silicon Valley Power was, I assume, the same as the capacity of the emergency generators, which was 72 megawatts, I believe, as I saw go by. Is that correct?
For the emergency backup generators, yes, that's correct.
So how much is that is in a measure of percentage of drain on the available Silicon Valley Power capacity?
I would not know
I
the
know,
answer
it's
to
an
that
MIT
question.
math question.
Sorry for the math test.
To clarify, it's not available. It's zero because it won't be available for several years. They won't be able to operate until they get agreement from SVP, which could be 2029 or 2030 at this point.
That's the information I needed. That's
Passed.
good, because it means that this is going to be planned into the capacity instead of dropped onto the capacity that we have now. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good. So my concerns are allayed. Thank you.
Great response. Thank you, staff, for that. Any other questions to staff before we open it up for applicant?
Madam Chair, I would like to address the question about the lot line adjustment earlier.
Yes.
So this notch here,
Yeah.
this is what will get included to make it a perfect rectangular corner, if you may. And I can show on the site plan, so it's the site, currently the property line is this, so it would include this little portion, about 3,500 square feet approximately.
So let's be clear for the record that that notch is not approved yet. The lot line adjustment has not happened yet.
Yes,
Okay? Just setting it for the record straight, that it's still a 5.12, potential proposed 5.20 with the approval of a lot line adjustment. Okay? Albeit it might go administratively, relatively simple. Okay, seeing no other questions to staff, I'd now like to open it to the applicant. Applicant, if you're ready with the presentation.
Question if I
Oh,
may.
sorry, Commissioner Chris.
That's quite all right. I'm a late guy sometimes, yeah.
Commissioner.
So in that neighborhood, do you notify residents about this and ask them if they have any opinion about this, or the people that go to the school, the parents of the children that go to the school, are any of them notified that this is being proposed?
the notification is sent to all properties within 500 feet radius of this property.
And so within 500 feet is no residence, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
500 feet as the street goes, not the crow flies.
Right, as the crow flies, I know. Shouldn't, in instances like this, shouldn't we make an exception and send it more to the residential that is closer to the 500, because 500 feet is not really that much. That's where you wanted to go, or you should have spoke up.
We could, and the public outreach policy will be coming back to you. I don't have the timeline on that right now, but in our current public outreach policy, there's a matrix for what the radius distance is and what type of project qualify. You could absolutely recommend that data centers have a larger noticing radius.
Yeah, when something like a project of this magnitude comes up, I mean, 500 feet is not enough. I mean, I know residents that another project similar to that went up and they were really fuming. So if this coming up is going to be something else.
Thank you for clarifying and confirming. Now we'll open it up for applicant. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Good evening. We don't have a formal presentation. I realize your time is valuable. I wanted to thank staff for all of their help. What we do have is we have our entire project team present. So I wanted to just take a moment, tell you their names, tell you their functions. Some of them are in the room with me. Some of the ownership for GI Partners is actually on the air. I know you folks are going to have questions, and I want to know who's here and who you can address the questions to, myself or the others. My name is Tim Guarnieri. I run a small company called Mission Critical Realty. I am the owner's rep for this project. I've been running the project here for several years, working with SVP and staff since the inception. Neil Sheehan is our primary architect. He's sitting behind me here for Woolpert. He did all the architectural renderings and so forth that you see. Jerry DeYoung, HMH Civil Engineering, has been working with Nisha and her team for quite some time. Remotely, we have Scott Galati, who's been our primary liaison to the California Energy Commission. Working with Scott is Mike Lisenby from DH Powers in terms of EIR and environmental questions, and although Scott and Mike are your folks. Patrick Murphy is working with us with SVP. Patrick is on the East Coast. He's probably getting a little sleepy right now, so if you have any power questions, we should probably do those first. And then there are a couple of members of the GI Partners team proper. They weren't able to be here this evening due to travel. There's Michael Lee, who's a director, and Alexa Nolan, who's on his staff. So the reason I wanted to come up and talk to you folks is that I watched your session last night with City Council. Understand there's a lot of questions around data centers, and I respect that. And I just want to make sure that you folks know that we brought the entire team, all of us, all disciplines, all the subject matter experts, for you to avail yourselves for any questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the full team being both available and accessible. Anybody else who wants to speak? Please, through the commission, if you are with the team. Okay, I just want to make sure, if it's not through the team, we will give you opportunity to address your question through the commission, and it'll be addressed, hopefully. No worries. So, any questions to the applicant?
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner Crutchlow?
Let's start at the top. Who's the data center for? Exercise is always good, however you get it.
So when we started the project, there are several large enterprises and operators interested in working with GI Partners on this. One of the challenges we've had is that, and this is very well known, right? Silicon Valley Power's got issues, the city's got other land use issues. So we have a lot of interest, but where it stands right now is the folks that are talking to us are, number one, waiting for us to complete this process, right? There's Planning Commission, City Council, and so forth, because it's hard to have a customer conversation when you don't have entitlements, right? It's not real, right? Not to them anyway. And then, as I believe the Assistant City Attorney mentioned, powers 28, 29, 2030, depending. I follow the city very closely. I do a lot of business here. So I'm hoping, I think you folks just approved a 300 megawatt project to bring in power from Southern California. I know that Manuel and his team are talking to Bloom Energy and the like. So we are sort of hoping, fingers crossed, That timeline comes in a little bit from, we don't know, obviously, right? From 2030, 2029, 2027. When we have a bit more clarity on that, the customer discussions start in earnest. We have two classes of customers talking to us now, right? One we refer to in the industry as operators, right? The Vantages, the CoreSites, the Digitals of the world, that would operate the property on behalf of GI Partners, who is the primary investor. They're a real estate investment.
So would you be like a Hurricane Electric where you would wind up having, hey, got a data center, you want a colo, you can bring your equipment in, or we have equipment for you, or is it going to be like entirely one company like Amazon or somebody else using that data center?
It could be either or both. So I'll give you two examples, right? I'm under NDA, right? So one of the folks we're talking to is an operator. I'm not at liberty to give you their name. They would co-develop the site with us over time, with SVP, with yourselves, with the council, and so on. And then they would turn around and have the same business model as Vantage across the street, okay? There are others, we refer to them as hyperscalers. We call them the Big Five. They're already all over Santa Clara, as you know. They're talking to us, that would be a single use then, right? That would be one customer, one building would be all theirs. And there's a lot of those in Santa Clara. We don't have clarity yet because we have to complete the municipal process. We have to get, right when we're done, moments after we're done, we'll have deeper conversations about timing and availability because it's taken us a couple of years to develop the property anyway. So yes, we have customers of a couple of different flavors. It's a little too early in the conversation for me to go much deeper than that.
So what you're going to do is you're basically developers, and you develop it, and at some point it goes into how we make it into a data center with somebody else.
Yeah, we didn't go into this speculatively, right? We made an investment. We went through this process. We've had a lot of people talking to us that want to be in Santa Clara. They want a data center in Santa Clara. You have, 60 of them here. So this wasn't just a speculative toss of a coin. And because of the timing issues and resource issues, we've been working with the city now for several years.
Okay, so you say you have somebody lined up, but you can't, because of NDA, speak about who they are.
I can't speak about who they are, and I also can't speak with clarity because we aren't yet through entitlements, so we can't take those conversations any deeper with any prospective tenant or client because we're not there yet, right? It's hard to get into formal conversations until we complete the municipal process.
Okay, and then let's say that this gets approved, and we know this is going to take a number of years because of power and such like that. What will happen to the current building?
Well, the current building will be maintained, right? There's tenants in the building now, and the grass and the yard and so forth. I mean, GI Partners is a real estate investment firm that has billions of dollars of property under investment management. In fact, 20 years ago, they were the creators, literally the creators of Digital Realty Trust and other firms. So there's no intention to create blight, right? We're going to maintain the building as is, where is, until such time that, again, we complete the process, we go through development protocol, we'll probably be back in front of you again, and really solidify the customer relationships. It's a little bit further down the line than today.
Okay, and then in terms of the data center itself, technically, how are you going to architect it to make the most use out of the electricity that you get so that we're as efficient as possible and so on and so forth? What kind of features of this data center do you have to make it a very optimal use data center?
Not sure I understand the question. We've designed it to the most current standards available to us.
Okay, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Right? Get a rack. I can go ahead and put AC in that rack for every device I have in. Or I can say, look, I'm going to use DC to go into the rack, and everybody, their power supplies are different. And it can be a more efficient use of the power when you have to do less conversions all the time, things like that. So, I'm not a big expert on this, but I'm just kind of curious. I understand you're trying to meet code, but are you doing anything more than that to try to make sure we get, every ounce of electricity goes through there is as efficiently used as possible?
We have the expert here.
My name is Neil Sheehan. I'm the architect for the project, and I believe I can offer some information.
Please.
Whenever we design data centers of this sort, they are highly modular. So the lineup from power into the building to generators to UPS to the data hall floor is done in increments so that that equipment can be installed in those increments as the power comes available and as the customers need that power. So that's the strategy we follow when we do these designs. And that optimizes as you're saying, it optimizes the capital expense on all of that equipment, and it allows us to grow with customers as the power is available and the customers have the demand.
Thank you. Back to the other gentleman real quick. So you heard us talk about the notification that went out to 500 feet. How do you feel about that, given the residential area is just outside of that 500 feet? Would you think it would be helpful to let the neighbors know that this is the potential use for that building?
I would respectfully defer that decision to staff and to, I mean, that's a city policy decision, right? We are trying very hard to stay inside the lines with the CEC, with yourself. If it's 500 feet or 600 feet or 1,000 feet is really a municipal decision. I'll be transparent with you. It's not that it doesn't matter to me. It's what matters to the residents of Santa Clara is up to all of you and the city council and SVP and the like. We're just trying to follow the rules. So if 500 feet's the rules, I think it was Commissioner Bouza that said, well, wait a minute, this is a big building and maybe it should be longer. That's probably a conversation for a future meeting. For the purposes of our project, we're just trying to follow the rules that were set by either the PCC, by the CEC, and other folks.
Understand. Thank you very much. So finally, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bouza, if you want to hang out.
Yes, got it. Real quick question. What makes you, in Santa Clara, did you look at any other locations besides Santa Clara? Like Sunnyvale or Mountain View or San Jose? Just
For
curious.
this particular project, no. There are other projects that I'm involved in with this client and others all over the country. The Santa Clara has been a magnet and a beacon for many, many years. There's a reason why you have 60 data centers here. And we all know about the power situation being cheaper and so on. But this municipality has also been known for 20-odd years to be very, business friendly and business omniscient, right? This planning commission, the city council, you try to go in front of Sunnyvale or San Jose or Milpitas or Fremont, those conversations aren't as fluid because they don't really have very many data centers. And so there's power, there's connectivity, you've got NVIDIA, you've got...
So the advantage, the building that was there before used to be an office building and it had quite a few employees. Now, the data center you're proposing to build there, how many employees and what's going to be the benefit for the city of Santa Clara? Because your benefit is to take our power, to suck our power at a lower rate. But what's the benefit for the city of Santa Clara in itself? I mean, business taxes and so on.
Yes.
So you're not going to have that many employees there. So what is the benefit for the city?
So for a data center of this size, the IT infrastructure that goes inside the building, servers, if you will, are going to cost, at a minimum, tens of millions of dollars, and there will be property taxes on those purchases. My understanding from looking at prior planning commission presentations and prior applicants, and if there's somebody from SVP watching, maybe they can keep me honest here, my understanding is that for every megawatt consumed at the data center, there's roughly $50,000 of contribution to the general fund, right? So between the property taxes and the general fund, there's a lot of money, we believe, going into city coffers. And yes, to your point, we don't have a lot of employees, but we also don't need a lot of traffic, a lot of housing, a lot of schools, a lot of playgrounds, a lot of police, a lot of fire. We don't have a lot of people. And there's, I believe, a financial contribution through property taxes and through contributions to the general fund from SVP.
Yeah, most of the employees that work for the adjacent businesses there, they don't live in Santa Clara. But the only source that I see, the only reason that I see you coming here is because of our power. So you're like vampires. You're sucking our power from the citizens. The citizens only absorb close to 6% or 8% of the power source, and the data centers are the ones that are sucking everything. But I don't see anything in return, because you're saying we get money in our coffers for the power, but that's really, we're giving it to you at a lower rate. If it was up to me, if I was Silicon Valley Power, I would say, no, you're going to pay like close to PG&E rates, and you'll see that you wouldn't be building data centers here, in other words. You'd be going someplace else.
Perhaps. I guess the only thing that I would say is that, you know, whatever rate schedules SVP uses, we will conform to. I mean, there's not, you know, on the power piece, I believe it was Commissioner Salem said, you know, in our plan, and the city attorney confirmed, we are years out from being able to get power from Silicon Valley Power. We are part of the long-term, larger Santa Clara plan. So I don't, perhaps this is narrow-minded of me, but I don't view this as detrimental, rather complementary, because Silicon Valley Power has been talking to us for years, and we're in their longer-term plan, so presumably this is going to be synergistic with other needs in the city. That's my assumption, but that's probably a question better asked of staff or SVP than myself.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bose. I do have a question for the architect, coming from an architectural interest. Can each floor be separated until you are fully occupied for consuming HVAC, water cooler, the air cooler systems? Can they be separated in their utilities?
Yes, they can, and they are.
They are. So
Yes.
if you, basically you can shell 2 floors, 1 floor, 4 floors,
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
and they can be independent.
Yes.
And in the floors, like occupancy sensors are for human occupants, is there an opportunity to, again, additionally administer where it's necessary rather than have the entire floor, entire building activated at all times?
That's generally how it works.
Okay.
Yes.
We'd like to learn more since it's all new for us. But as you have seen, and thank you for being prepared from yesterday's conversation, just wanted to make sure that we're all aligned in the future state of how we are maximizing resources and optimizing
I could
resources.
offer an illustration of the building across the street, which we did for Vantage. That's a 4-story building, very similar in scale to this one. And in that instance, Vantage scaled the capital cost of the building over time by building it in 3 phases. So they built a front part, then they built the next component, and then the next component as the tenant occupied the building. And Commissioner Crutchlow, to your earlier question about who is a likely user for a building of that sort, I don't believe I'm revealing anything in saying, and you're probably aware, that Microsoft took the whole of that building. And it's quite typical in our industry for users of that sort to not take a building or not sign up for that lease until the project is in the ground, until it's really tangible, quite clearly approved and proceeding.
Understood. And I'm still going to pull you back into the architectural design of this building. The finishes, I know I didn't get the full 3D view. Is there more glass than actual break in the design?
So I anticipated your question.
Okay, good, thanks.
If we could put one of the renderings up, in particular the
That rendering is fine, but the
side
rendering
faces
that's to the,
Bowers. Yeah.
there is no break,
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb a little bit.
okay?
We design data centers all over the world at my firm and have designed a great many of them for everybody you might imagine is responsible for developing data centers. And for us, we like the building to be about what's going on inside it. So we've always resisted the notion of fake windows with nothing behind them. And so in a case like here in Santa Clara, where we know there are concerns about creating an architecturally interesting building, that's a challenge for us, and we really appreciate that challenge. There are some other municipalities where we have that same sort of interest. We bring that to any of our projects, whether the municipality asks for it specifically or not. This is a case where the office area, as you can see, is the one end of the building, which is quite typical. And so we've provided curtain wall glazing on that end. And then for the rest of the building, the elevation on down, which has data hall behind it, Around the office, we call this the data wave. It's an expression, an architectural expression to enliven the facade, but without things like fake windows. And, you know, some people see this and they like it a lot. Some people see this and, you know, not so much. Maybe worse than not so much. You know, we've heard all sorts of comments over the years.
So would you be open to then the future aesthetic design coming back to Planning Commission rather than just the Architectural Design Review Committee? We have a different version of administration,
Got it.
public hearing process.
As a representative of the owner, I will do whatever is required here in the community.
Thank you for being flexible.
Yes.
Of course, I've seen that as well. That same design is on front of Lawrence Expressway. The at least a similar looking building, and I've assumed it to be a data
Is there
center.
really? Uh-oh.
Exactly. So I appreciate, and as an architectural background myself, I appreciate your version or your beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder very much so, and the intent to keep more appropriate level of aesthetic finishes. I'm not saying that you should light everything up or put windows or glass everything. I just like to see more fenestration and a little more break in the monotony of it, looking like a blank Great Wall of China there, depending on the depth and the width. There's no break in fenestration or break in the linearity of it.
I would encourage you to look at rendered views from the ground looking up at it.
Okay,
A flat elevation of this sort is very deceptive.
understood. So that's one of the reasons why I said maybe it should come back to Planning Commission so we see the aesthetics.
You can create all the images in the world,
Thank you.
including movies.
We hope to someday. Thank you for your responses. Any questions to?
Yeah, one quick question about that. Could you, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm making everybody go back and forth. My apologies. The security around this, what is this going to be like? What kind of fences, what kind of security guards and such?
This present design shows the typical sort of fence that you've seen in the community around data centers. It's that vertical picket fence that, you know, has been essentially adopted by the industry worldwide, with gates on the, rolling gates on the driveway entrances.
And how many security guards and stuff for the facility?
This facility of this sort would not have guards out at the property line.
Okay.
There would be a traffic control where you pull up and you press a button and someone
Gate
gets
arms.
the gate to open for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Please wait. One more last question. Why is the interest to have a 43-foot fence sound attenuation? Why are the generators that high?
I'm glad you asked that question. Our intention when we have a surface of that sort is, as you walk around the building, that should read as a building wall, not as a fence. So while it is a metal panel, in this case, exterior architectural metal panel wall, it's set back from the property line. It's not on the property line. There's parking outside of it and driveways and landscaping and all the rest. And it's really very much the same as any screen wall you would see around generators here at any of the data centers.
So in the rendering I can see, is the trees intended to be outside of that 43, and let me put it this way, within your property and off the property that's adjoining, and between the 43-foot fence itself, like?
Could we pull up the site plan real quickly and we can just point out. So you can see each of those little boxes on the top side of the building. Those are the generators extending.
Yeah,
along.
those are the generators,
Correct.
yes. Okay.
And so then this screen wall enclosure is just outside of those generators. You can see it below the roadway, and yes, following along where the cursor is going there. So then there is a walkway, there's the roadway, there's a landscaping verge with some of those 91 trees.
What's the setback from the property line?
I'm afraid I don't know that
Staff?
off the top of my head. I could approximate it at,
I think it's on the drawings. Staff can.
yeah, it does look, if you zoom all the way in, there's a.
Yes, it is on the drawings. I don't remember it exactly, and I don't think if I zoom in, it will
Yeah,
be
I'm going
legible.
to approximate it at about 40 feet.
Okay, that's what it was, I was
this
trying to
is about
ballpark it. That's
60
65
feet.
in the front, right?
Yeah, this is 60 feet in the front and 108 feet in the
60.
front here. So
Maybe a little more than 40.
a little bit lower than that, maybe 50 feet or something around there.
Okay, and how tall are these generators?
In this instance, the generators are one above another on a platform. So they are quite tall. The enclosures for the generators are typically 14 feet high. So with the second enclosure and airspace and the like, again, I'm approximating, I don't know off the top of my head what the height is to the top of those.
And what's
The
your,
elevation may show that.
so you have like 30 feet of generators just from your platform, and I'm assuming the platform is a solid concrete?
It is usually, and in this case, it would be an open mesh metal to allow air to flow through.
Okay. And how tall is the platform?
Platform would be in the range of 24 feet, 20 feet.
So above the 20-foot platform is the 30-foot double stacked?
No.
Okay.
Generators below and above.
Okay.
So
but
generators
what's the
on the platform.
Footing or
Two
the
levels.
platform is the solid foundation? It's raised above the ground, I'm
So it's
assuming?
ground with generators on it,
On it, okay,
platform at about 24 feet
okay,
with more generators.
got it. And that platform is what you were saying, what's
It's
that,
open for airflow,
is 24 feet?
correct.
And then you have a 14-foot.
Then you have another generator on top. Holy moly, yeah. And if you would like to see one of these, there is one across the street at the Vantage Project, similarly screened. It's an impressive assembly.
By in itself.
Yeah.
And what's the material you use for sound attenuation? Sorry, I'm having an education here, bear with me.
Yeah, so for a project of this sort, we use, on the inside face, perforated corrugated metal. And then that's mounted on stud framing, much like you would see in interior wall construction, though much heavier. And then we put mineral wool insulation fitted between the studs. And then there's an exterior wall, and those exterior wall materials can be anything. So that interior surface then absorbs the sound. And, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fascinating. Thank you very much for your patience, I appreciate it.
Welcome. We could go on
Any
all night.
questions before we let the poor team go? Okay, Commissioner?
Just one quick thing. The generators, since they're diesel, you're aware that the wind comes from the north and you're going to be blowing it right to the residential and the school whenever those things are fired up, all the diesel fuel.
Well, I'm getting a little out of my area. Michael Lisenby is on the call with us, and perhaps he could answer.
And what's the decibel, how many, the noise level, how many decibels is it equivalent to?
In
if you fire
looking
all
at
four- all of
in
them?
looking at the report, I believe we were seeing, and Michael, correct me if I get it wrong, 48 dB from the generators at the residential receptor. And
Yes,
that,
this is Mike Lisenby. I'm with David J. Powers and Associates.
Mike's
And
got the.
yes, Neil, that is correct. It's 48 decibels at the nearest residences.
But what's it at source? So, thank you.
And that, by the way, is the background noise level, day and night, is around 60 dB. So we're below background noise level.
That's a
In
lot.
fact, we're
60 is
below
the acceptable
background
level of
noise
heat.
level around the entire
60 is the
property.
acceptable
Yeah,
level.
but when you're close to a house, it's not.
No, I'm saying at source versus at the distance.
One thing that you're not taking in consideration too, when you have the wind
direction.
travels, the wind direction is going to be coming right over the residential house, you're going to be just a little bit over 500 feet from those generators, so you're going to hear it.
Except the 43-foot sound attenuation wall.
I want to see that one.
Okay. Thank you again for clarifying, and I appreciate the details. Okay. We've given applicant enough time. I would like to now open for public comment. Please come forward.
Good evening, esteemed members of the commission. My name is Oscar Mazariegos. I'm here as a field representative for the Carpenters Local Union 405. Hopefully I have enough time to read this, but as a carpenter deeply rooted in the community, I stand before you today with hope and anticipation regarding this proposed data center project at 2805 Bowers Avenue. This project has the potential to not only shape our city's infrastructure, but also uplift our community in significant ways. What makes this project truly promising is the opportunity it presents to embrace responsible contracting practices. It's imperative that we prioritize hiring contractors who are dedicated to fostering good-paying jobs within our community. We must seek those who understand the importance of providing opportunities for youth, veterans, and marginalized individuals to find a path to the middle class. Like Commissioner Buza was saying, just kind of touching up on what he said, is in order to give back to the community and stuff like that, things that they could do is kind of like local hiring or prevailing wage, not prevailing wage, but area standard wages, I'm sorry, which would give back to the community in building this building. As someone who has witnessed firsthand the transformation from power of accredited apprenticeship, I strongly advocate for ensuring that this project commits to such programs. By investing in apprenticeship, we not only equip individuals with valuable skills to build a career, but also instill in them a sense of purpose and direction. In closing, I urge the Planning Commission to consider the broader impact of this project beyond the physical footprint. Let us seize the opportunity to not only construct the data center, but also to build a brighter future for our community, one that values opportunity and economics empowerment. And I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Hold on. Is there a question for the public member or just for staff?
Both.
Okay.
Let me start with something that I know Sandra is waiting for me to say.
Yes, I have it.
Okay. Can you, one of these days I'm just going to have to write it down and just keep it with me all the time. Do you have that in writing that you can mention? Because then my next question is going to be to both the person who just spoke and the applicant.
Yes, for purposes of members of the public, there is a condition that this commission has imposed on some prior projects that reads as follows. The city encourages the owner and any contractors or subcontractors working on the project to evaluate hiring local labor, hiring from or contributing to approved accredited apprenticeship programs, increasing resources for labor compliance, and providing living wages during the development of this project. And I believe,
Thank you. Is that, I have a question for both groups here. Is that a problem for you? Sir?
No, it's not. I just wanted to state for the record that as part of the process we went through with the CEC and others, we've been asked to, for lack of better terms, put together an LOI, a letter of intent, saying that when we develop it, we will use union labor. It's called a PLA.
Yes, I'm aware of what the PLA is.
You would be.
Okay, thank
But to
you.
the gentleman that was, I know comments to you, not to him, but we fully intend to stick by that. So when eventually this gets built, there will be union labor.
You'll get into a PLA, and I assume that that's meets what you were trying to say earlier or a few minutes ago? All right, so I'd like to add that when we get to that point as a condition of approval.
Sure, I have a
Commissioner
question to
Bhatnagar.
staff. Yeah, thank you. So if you people were there in the meeting yesterday with the city council, and the council member Chahal brought up good point about the fact that we have all these data centers and that we have not, to put it in a straight and blunt way, monetized the value that these enterprises have received from the city over time, right? So to encapsulate that point, the additional draw that this project needs is part of the development plan for Silicon Valley Power to deliver that as they grow their capacity over the next several years. And that's great, but the cost of that growth gets passed on to the citizens of Santa Clara. And so the per megawatt remuneration that the city gets, that's part of the deal. But that's a static part of the deal that does not improve or leverage with time. So all this to say is this suggestion by Councilmember Chahal going to be a part of our deal with the owner and the potential applicants here? Or we're just going to leave it as is and there's going to be yet another data center in the city of Santa Clara, and perhaps in the future you'll give us another project adjacent to these projects saying, look how many there are already in this area. Why can't we have one more? I'll stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner Bhatnagar. Staff, are you able to respond? Since the question was for staff.
Well, this is a legislative act. This is a general plan amendment. So the Planning Commission and the City Council have a lot of discretion whether or not they want to proceed as a policy matter at this time. I believe what you were asking about sounded like you're suggesting, what additional benefit is there to the city for putting yet another data center in this location. That sounds like something that would either need to be done on a policy scale or would have to be done through a development agreement. There is no development agreement for this proposal, so this project would not be subject to anything like that.
It's a great clarification. Thank you. So just to rephrase, anything that is monetized or expected is technically handled through a DA, a development agreement, but because this is a regular discretionary use permit application and within the framework of general plan amendment, it comes under a different purview.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, I'm first going to go take the action. Any members of the public who are online that we haven't heard from? We're still in public comment period.
We do have one hand online.
Staff, if you could.
Scott, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Thank you. This is Scott Galati. I actually am with the applicant. I just wanted to let you know that the California Energy Commission, all of its noticing, including all of the sequel work in the EIR, was done with a radius of 1,000 feet from the project, and a lot of work in the newspapers in all of the languages that show up within a 6-mile radius.
Thank you, Scott, and you should have spoken up as representative applicant. Great clarification again, and it might alleviate some things that might come out of this meeting otherwise. Any other members of the public online?
No, we don't have any other requests for comments.
Seeing none in the chambers, I'd like to have a motion to close public hearing, public comment.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, we need rebuttal first.
Oh,
He doesn't have to exercise it, but the applicant has 5 minutes.
thank you. Again, before June sometime. The applicant is granted 10 minutes for any rebuttal or reaffirmation statements. I mean, technically, we've heard everything. Thank you. Thank you for your acceptance. Seeing no intent to rebuttal, I will now encourage a motion.
Motion to close public debate?
We have a motion by Commissioner Biagini, seconded by Commissioner Boozer. Probably a verbal vote.
Yes, go ahead and cast your vote. Voted. You did.
Yay.
Very good, thank you, and the motion passed.
Okay.
Thank you. We can now encourage our commission members to now share your thoughts, albeit keep it short, succinct, decorum, respect.
Yeah, so if I may,
Commissioner Bhatnagar.
Chair, the question in mind is when is this going to be enough? It's a similar problem to the city building, the developers wanting to build million-dollar homes and not homes at the low end of the scale, and we have a homeless problem on the streets. It's a tough nut to crack. But at some point, we have to say, as a city, as a municipal organization, we have a responsibility to those people. They have a right to live here, and they have a right to a life that makes sense. And so, at some point, we have to say it's enough. And so, if I may, I think I've had enough data centers. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Boozer. Commissioner Boozer, I'm recognizing you.
Well, one of the things that was really surprised me on this was that the notice was only sent 500 feet and saying that the SECA report passed SECA, which really doesn't make any sense at all when you have a school so close by. A lot of the citizens in Santa Clara weren't aware of all these data centers till they started popping up left and right. And the bigger they got, the more intrusive in the neighborhoods. That's when people started to notice it. And lately, all I hear is people saying it's enough. We cannot afford to have any more data centers. A lot of the reason that we have to upgrade our power and buy power from somebody else is because those data centers are sucking up the powers and we're not getting anything out of it, really. It's minute what we're getting. They're making money. It's a business out of the back of the citizens of Santa Clara. They're the ones that built up the power plant, and it was made to bring businesses that create jobs and so on. And the data centers are completely the opposite of this, and taking real estate that is very valuable. These monstrosities are just consuming the real estate and not producing anything else for the citizens and for the citizens of Santa Clara. And I think, speaking for what I've been hearing from the citizens, any sense. I mean, enough is enough. We've got plenty of.
Didn't get notifications about things that did affect us, and we went to this. If the residents had gotten notifications, I would like the people that are affected by it in 500 feet. Doesn't make sense to me. School obviously live in different areas, and people who definitely live there feel data centers are good. I gotta say my own vested interests is, but at the same time, we have to balance it out with what's going on nearby and such. So I have the opportunity to represent themselves and give their opinions as well and get answers as to, why this is a benefit to the neighborhood.
Tough one for me, because I have a lot of concerns about noise. And I've heard some pretty good better explanations than I've heard in the past about noise abatement. I'm trying to think of the positive things here, right? When I hear things, when every city has post-COVID budget issues at 50 mego, every 50 meg, what is it, every 50? Every megawatt amounts to 50K in a general budget. That's a benefit to the city, can't be denied. But then we get into the is enough enough. I will say this, one of the complaints I always have had about data centers is a subjective one. They're ugly. This one, you get some points. They're not so ugly, okay? I understand about the window issue. I worked for the phone company at central office. Those places never have windows, and I understand why. So I'm a little bit torn. I don't know when enough is enough, but I know we're right up on it. I don't know that is this where you draw the line? Is the next one where you draw the line? And at what point, 40 years from now, are we going to look back and say, why did we do it? Because the law of unintended consequences, you find out after the fact. I just want to hear from the rest of my colleagues, because I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Crutchlow, and that kind of gets to me too, is I understand that when you notify neighbors, because I've seen signs on light poles, and let me tell you, I'm probably the only one who reads them. And we have plenty of people walking their dogs in my neighborhood. Then there's this issue of, did you send, snail mail to their house, right? I think we're all in that position of, oh, look, more junk mail. And there it goes. So I'm with Commissioner Crutchlow that I sure the heck would have liked to have seen, and maybe that goes to the whole thing that we were talking about yesterday about public outreach policy, right? Where I heard from more people coming here. So I'm looking at this thing, I can see the benefits. General fund needs dollars, so does every city. We're post-COVID, we need it. But on the other hand, at what cost? And that's where I have the dilemma. I'm not quite sure where I feel about this right now. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Biagini. Commissioner Salem.
Okay. If I can do this in a rational approach. I'm disappointed that I have to argue against my own best feelings. I am not an advocate of data centers, but I don't feel we can penalize an applicant for our inability as a city with staff and commission and council to move policy that brings the data center golden apple out of the reach of every data center developer that's out there. It's our obligation to change the policy to make it less advantageous to use Santa Clara. I'm speaking to my commissioners rather than the public, I'm sorry. But it's our obligation to make data centers less obviously advantageous to move to Santa Clara. So I can't justify beating up on one applicant over the lack of our policy to address the issue. So I'm of the opinion that we need to move forward as a city, as a commission, as a council, to bring this under control and not have 70, 80, 90 data centers before something's done about it. So that's just my opinion on that. I really hate it. I don't want data centers to overwhelm the city, but I can't justify in the position that I'm in taking it out on this particular applicant. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Salem.
Only takes one time.
Hold on. Commissioner Crutchlow.
Thank you. So I agree with your sentiment, and I think last night when we talked to the city council regarding data centers, that was one of the key things that I wanted to see them let us do as a study group to go over what standards we want for data centers and how we want this to happen. Because to me, data centers are good, but if you don't plan them properly and such, they do affect the community, and we don't want that. And I don't think anybody here wants that, right? So, first thing to me, what I would like to see is, we're doing the long-term stuff, but we have an applicant in front of us. I agree with you. That being said, this is where, number one, first thing, we got to let the citizens here, we got to tell them, look, this is what's happening, and enlarge that area. It's something that's happened before. Like, I've been part of that process where I've said, hey, city, you are doing this over here. Could you please extend it? And they've been very good about extending it and saying, yeah, we'll give you time so that you can come in and do your thing. Great, thank you. So one of my things that I want to ask about here, since we seem to have some problems with lack of information, maybe, if I might want to say it that way, could we ask for maybe, is there a way to do a continuance on this? So we can give time to other people to come and possibly talk about it. And I think this would be very helpful for city council, maybe to see what people think of data centers and such, or is that procedurally not something that we could do? Because I don't want to say no. I want to be able to see what we can do to work this all out nicely.
Without necessarily dragging it out, but.
I don't want to drag it out because they want to, they have things that they want to do, and time is important, I get it, but we don't want to also just say we have to do it because that's the way it's been done.
Thank you.
Would you like me to?
Go ahead.
The general plan amendment that you're making a recommendation on is a legislative act. There are a number of governmental decisions that have firm timelines, but because this application includes a legislative act There are no firm deadlines on this project. It's also not a housing project, I should say. So it is within your discretion to request, to move for a continuance. Also, one of the findings in the conditional use permit is whether or not the project would adversely affect neighboring residents. So if you feel that you cannot make that finding without testimony from those residents, then a continuance would be in order. I suspect the applicant may have a view on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other deliberation before I go? Thank you. Okay. Not that I like to have the last word, although I do, but in this case as the chair. Just a couple of my own observations, and I'm just going to go cite a couple of facts. First off, our city continues to be a huge draw incentive, and I'll just cite some facts on our SVP. Large commercial in comparison to PG&E, we offer SVP is lower by 55% than PG&E. That's just sheer numbers. I can give you the actuals. That's for large commercial, and I'm assuming in this case the data centers fall under large commercial. It'll be, RA if we're not even considering them as large commercial. That said, even just across the spectrum, small commercial, small industrial, very large industrial, however we quantify this project to be, from comparison sheer numbers, SVP is absolutely 40% plus, 49%, 55% lesser than PG&E. Just the context of why Santa Clara continues to be this draw. The other numbers in context. Apparently, and this is again, fact check on me, I'm not going to say anything beyond that, it's a Google search. There are about 160 data centers in the Bay Area. Let's say, give a rough number to the number in city of Santa Clara. Okay? Let's be lenient to ourselves and say 55, at least as the known number.
You should go by square footage.
Of which I will come to that as well.
That's what
Okay.
she's going to. I can hear
Well,
it
there's no
coming.
dearth for facts online. Well, to fact check me beyond that, I have no idea. But of which I'm looking at the reasonable square footages of the surrounding data centers, and I'm just going to state what's on the record here, and this is the second highest is Vantage. Vantage is about 329,000 square feet. This is close to it with 244,000 square feet, although the report was a little disillusioning that it went as 55,000 square feet to CEC first and then corrected itself to be 244,000 square feet, 244,000 square feet. Let me give you in context with the surrounding cities, data centers, or how this probably just continued to grow and grow, and City of Santa Clara has some of the biggest. Fremont, Sunnyvale, Warm Springs, 55,000, 20,000, 30,000 square feet. And the closest that is even close to City of Santa Clara's is about 120,000 in San Jose. Those are just sheer numbers. Now I'll go with my own opinions on how we look at data centers moving forward. Yesterday's conversation was insightful. The applicant themselves has said that this does not have any real applicant. They're not like residential property owners who are significantly impacted economically, if with any other hardship to it if this does not move forward. It's a nice thing to have for them at this point. Digital Reality is probably one of the world's highest data centers in the country, so we know that there's big market. This is a nice another one in the mix. So my own perceptions changed based on just the semantics that there's no real applicant behind or an actual, which very soon, once entitlement's given, they'll swarm because we continue to give it out. And so my personal interest will continue to, I don't want to speak on both sides of my mouth when I say that we really need a moratorium on data centers in the city of Santa Clara.
There you go.
So with that, I'll leave my perception out here, and then we will go for a vote.
Okay.
Now,
Go ahead.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to say one thing. To put it bluntly and really simple terms, the reason they're coming in here, the data center, is this company, for instance, somebody owns a piece of land, a commercial building that is right now, it's not rented, and it's hard to get rented right now, says, hey, guess what, Joe? Guess Santa Clara has their own power plant. They got the rates are almost half what the PG&E rates are, so, and they're really easy to get along to. Why don't we just build the data center and the hell with it, and then just take off use all their, their power, and, they're easy to get along with. And that's what happened. Then one guy builds one, then another guy comes in. Before you know, we have the 60, all of the data centers. Meanwhile, the citizens of Santa Clara are saying, what's going on? How come we're getting a rate increase? How come we have to renew all our power plants? I thought it was big enough to for our city, and we were doing great. All of a sudden, it's gone. And all the spaces that we had before, we used to have businesses that were actually had people employed and were paying a business license taxes, they disappeared. And you have this monstrosity. So even when you're landing in San Jose, what you could see before was the University of Santa Clara. Now you see this big data center right off the runway, and you go, what is this? And people are just tired of it. It's nothing, I don't care what you say, we're not getting anything in return what we're supposed to be getting for that. And I blame Silicon Valley Power and also our council. I just say that for letting them get away with that. As a businessman, I would never do that to my business. Yeah, it's just inconceivable.
Well, I think that personally, when I'm landing in San Jose Airport, I'm not thinking about the data centers. I'm thinking about hopefully the pilot knows what he's doing.
And I'm late already.
I understand that. So I think that, look, this is not an either-or option. We don't want data centers or not. I think, the chair has said about a moratorium and such. That's where we want the study group to understand how this can work properly. There are, I know, limitations in SVP on how they can charge for electricity and how much income they can take in, and I would like to get some of those questions answered too, because I did talk to some people about that, and I don't know what our benefit is, but look, it has to be a partnership where both sides are getting benefit to it. And in doing so, I think, we need to get our act straight about it, and we are already in those discussions. Like you said, if you saw the council last night when we were talking to them, this was one of the hot topics. So I won't belabor it, but I do think that we also don't want to delay significantly a lot of this, because we do want people to, build and get done what they want done. But at the same time, you're looking at building this and getting it done in a number of years. So maybe we have some breathing room here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Critchlow and Commissioner Biagini.
This is what makes this so hard, because in general, yes, I think there should be a moratorium. I can say that because I don't think, and I'm not going to sit here and lay blame on the city council. We can all finger point, and where does it get us, right? But we're being asked to make a recommendation, but I feel, sort of tags with what you were saying, Eric, I sort of feel like there should have been things in place before. We have to keep having this come before us. So this issue of when is enough, when should we install a moratorium? Because I think Commissioner Salem also makes a heck of a good point. I mean, I kind of, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but honestly, I think we're all of the opinion that, whoa, Nellie, time to rein in and take a macro look at it. But who do we hurt in the process, right? Because we don't have that policy, and really, is it our purview, and does it mean anything? Because after all, we're all a recommendation. I don't like the position that puts us in, and I don't like the position I'm in to have to say it. So I'm still, quite frankly, I'm not sure which way I want to go.
Okay, you have 2 minutes before the motion comes through.
You're right, I do.
All right, seeing Commissioner Salem, did you have some thoughts of wisdom?
Given all of this conversation, I'll look to staff and to legal. How do we make motion? How do we not make a motion? How do we get motion on reviewing and revising city policy to address data centers? I don't want to keep getting data center after data center, each one of them asking to be built, and all we do is throw up well, that's our policy. We let it happen. how do we adjust policy within the scope and purview of the commission through the council? What's the next step that we can do?
Well, I think you did it last night. I don't know what else you can do until the council makes the policy decision to move forward with that. I'm sure it's going to be part of their goal-setting priorities, given the positive feedback I understand you received last night.
Is that a policy decision to have a study group or something different? I want to be very clear. If we want a study group, doesn't the study group come before a policy?
Well, I missed the study group part of that, I'm sorry.
It wouldn't be a study group. It would be, they would prioritize creating a policy around data centers, which would require study and analysis.
Okay,
So they first need to say, yes, staff, we're going to work on a policy for data centers. And that needs to be a priority that they direct staff
and
to
that would
do.
have to be on the council's meeting and.
Yeah, the upcoming priority setting that they'll
Understood.
be having soon, yes.
But how does that affect this particular applicant then?
That would not affect this applicant under current policy.
They'd have to come back, that's what you're telling me?
Well, it depends on the decision that's made on
Right.
what's before you this evening. And then how the council ultimately decides as well.
No,
Right.
I don't think we can all, kind of by proxy here, say, we're going to put a moratorium on it. That's in effect what would happen. So I think we have to do stuff on our schedule, and we have to be nice enough to do stuff on their schedule, but I still go back to my original, get people, the residents involved. I would like to see that. If we didn't have anything else in terms of policy and stuff, that would be the one thing that I think should happen, my recommendation.
We should not even have to come up to that point. I was really amazed that when it came up to 500 feet, I just went like, what the heck,
Thank you very much for all the emotional and rational comments.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Some things doesn't make sense.
Okay, I am going to request a motion. We have 3 motions that are recommended by staff. One is to adopt a resolution accepting the EIR prepared by the California Energy Commission and adopting the mitigation monitoring reporting program. Do I have a motion?
I thought we were also looking at the alternative to do a continuance.
That is a possible motion.
But
there's 2 things that need to be at least defined for a continuance. One is a date specific. What are we holding the continuance related to? And is that a time bound? Because State Streamlining Act will kick in as well.
Agreed. So the help I need is, I would like to make a motion for a continuance to allow more public comment by creating a larger distance, however you would call that, to include the residents and the school specifically, so the school could know to notify the parents of the students and stuff of what's happening. Can you help me with that?
Next Planning Commission meetings are February 21st and March 6th. So am I understanding correctly that you'd like staff to proceed with a broader noticing and
Broader noticing. And what do you normally use in terms of time for these kinds of notifications? Yeah, so I think the next meeting is just fine, in February.
So, excuse me, are you going to send one directly to the school also in the daycare center? Because there's also a daycare center there too.
we can absolutely include those in the noticing. But I mean, it'll be all properties within whatever radius you prescribe.
They're in the same place.
And to be clear, I mean, a large part of getting a development project across the line is the applicant engages with the community and conducts outreach. You see it more in, housing developments, but part of the process is meeting with the community. So I don't know how much time the applicant needs to conduct the necessary outreach, but I would think you would want that to be part of it.
Sure, sure, take that into consideration,
Saying a community meeting first? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just suggesting that as one of the options, to have a community meeting. So, yeah, I don't know the time necessary to get that all done. But yeah, February 21st would be the earliest date we could have another hearing, and then March 6th after this. If there is a community meeting, then maybe March 6th is more realistic.
Correct.
Is there a clause
would we
that
wor-
we do date certain, or can we make it date uncertain and let the noticing, anyway you're going to notice? So we don't need to pick a date.
You're right. The whole point of this is to do
Exactly.
more noticing. So there's no need to either pick a date certain or reopen the public hearing. But you can state a date if you'd like. I mean, I'm sure the applicant would appreciate the certainty of a date certain.
Since the applicant is here, do they have any input on it? Does it matter to them what date we pick? Sooner the better, then let's go with February.
Know that it takes time. What's a typical noticing period?
10 days.
I do not think there's time to do both the community meeting and mail out and be back here by February 21st.
That would be correct,
March 6th
yeah.
is the next date then.
If you want to have a community meeting, I don't know if, that was just something
I think
I threw
that
out
would be a
there.
good idea.
Is that,
Already working at it.
When you say, okay, let's go with this. When you say a community outreach, that's done by whom?
typically the applicant?
Applicant, okay. So do you want, does the applicant want an opportunity to have a community outreach?
Just wanted to raise a point of clarification. I hear your concerns. You want a wider radius, you want more public input, you want more noticing. From the applicant's perspective, we would look for that work to be done by staff. Like we don't send out public notices. We don't receive information from the public. We're just the applicant. So we'll follow your lead. You're the commission, but this is not something that I, on behalf of the applicant, can that we're going to effectually do. We have to look to you to do this work.
Well, I think go ahead, you can explain.
I think there's a version. So yes, the noticing is done by staff as the protocol requirements for noticing, but where there is also encouragement is where there are a large project, the applicant has taken the initiative to go and do their own outreach, host a town hall type of a meeting, either at the school or at a venue, and allow more of an engagement and early feedback reception, and then bring their recommendation saying, look, we met the public and we met these stakeholders, and here is their feedback, and here we've addressed it, and here we haven't, or something to that effect. So it's a two-way road. If you feel like that's asking too much, then you're welcome to state that.
Could staff help set something like that up if they're not in the business of doing that?
So in Santa Clara, the applicant holds the community meetings. Staff,
Right.
City staff does not hold community meetings.
No, I understand that, but I'm thinking the logistics of it, right? Hey, I'd like to hold a community meeting.
We would create the mailing notice and the radius.
It's
Yes.
just the mailing
Yeah,
notice
correct.
saying that
Okay.
such a meeting is going to be.
So they would have to talk to the school and see if the school has room and so forth.
They would
Logistics
find the
happen.
location, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like other
I got you.
jurisdictions.
I'm going to probably need to go consult with ownership and with my team. The larger concern is if we effectuate this and have a meeting and there are upset residents, but we as the applicant don't have anything actionable to bring back to you, right? The items before you are largely, in my view, administrative. I understand that there's policy and there's zoning and there's all kinds of things. There will absolutely be one or more persons who just doesn't want data centers. And they'll come and they'll tell us that, and we'll come and we'll tell you that, but
Yeah.
that doesn't give the applicant anything actionable to change
Exactly.
matters that are in front of you.
Right.
So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that my client's going to be opposed to it. I'm going to have to take that offline and say, how would you want to do this? How can we make this an objective process? How do we get actionable things to come back to you with? Because if
Okay,
it's
hold
a
on,
bunch
hold
of
on.
folks-
Wait. I think maybe it's a little confusing. Let me make sure it's clear. It's voluntary on your side. And number two, what would happen is it would be the opportunity for the citizens to come and ask you questions, and then they can always come here and then make their thoughts known. So it isn't that we're asking you to necessarily collect it. You can, saying, yeah, we talked to these people and this is what they said. But they also obviously have the opportunity to come to the public meeting as well and give their opinion. So it isn't like we're saying you have to do this. It's a voluntary.
Oh, no, and I'm just trying to be transparent with all of you, and my client's watching, my team is watching.
Yes,
I don't know how they feel about that. We'll take that offline probably tomorrow morning. It's just that, in terms of moving this process forward as the applicant, my larger concern is we can do all of this and be back in front of you in 2 or 3 weeks and have nothing different to say than we said tonight. That's my concern. Right?
Then how about I suggest this, if I may, that we don't necessarily set a date, that there are some things that staff needs to consider.
Understood. So thank you so much. I appreciate, because we haven't opened public hearing, I just want to be mindful of how much we engage after closing public comment. So while the deliberation is happening, to Commissioner Critchlow's point, there is an ability for, once the outreach noticing happens, if the item gets continued, that now we have done from 500 to 1,000, more people are aware. Hopefully they actually profess an interest and come and either stage or, affirm their interest. That's a possibility. What the applicant is trying to say is, what does it mean? I mean, we're back where we are. That's what we have done that far. And if you don't get anything that's really credible from an actual, and what does it mean for the Planning Commission in general? Because all you're going to get is, again, an opinion, which we all have. It doesn't objectify or put, again, the ability for the denial or approval. Yeah. We still have to move forward with the same application, which is a use permit or a general plan amendment and the EIR certification.
Let me, Madam Chair, to use an example. Remember when Sobrado wanted to put containers, make a development for containers? Well, you did send it more than 1,000 feet, more than 500 feet. The residents in the area were so appalled at that they filled this hall, went downstairs. The cafeteria was also filled, and also the waiting area alongside of here were filled with residents wanting to be heard regarding that project. I got a feeling that if you do send that out, you're going to get a lot of involvement with the community in that little enclave or homes there, which is quite a few, because you have condominiums in that area, and you have single-family homes and duplexes and rental units there, and also some nice homes in that area too. And I got a feeling you're going to get a really high output of people telling us how they feel about it, if they're pro or against that certain project. So I want to give the residents of that area the opportunity to tell us what they want, and then also the council will be able to hear how the residents in that area feel and make their decisions regarding that project.
I think we agree with you. It's just how do we put the bell around the cat's neck?
We'll start, we'll have to take one step. Let them start their step, and then from there on, we'll grow. We'll do it the same way that they did with that project came up.
You're talking on Monroe and, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But it's also the applicant's way when, you're going to have people go, I don't want that there, I don't want that there. What good does it do? It gives y'all an opportunity to say, here's what the good is. So it's a two-way street, like the chair said.
Yep. How do we make this motion? It sounds like March 6th is the earliest reasonable date we could use.
You could simply direct staff to, you could move to continue this to March 6th and direct staff to notice that meeting with a radius of X feet. That will presumably give the applicant time to, so their voluntary community meeting.
I would want to move to continue the
This item.
project to March 6th. And have staff notify, what would you say, 1,500 feet?
This is going to impact.
Commissioner Salem?
Yeah, I would recommend not putting a distance, but say the nearest neighbors, the nearest residents, so that the notification reaches the people affected rather than somebody putting a ruler on a map.
Understood. So we want to do the residents, but I mean, we have to give them some kind
You
of,
have to give them something.
something guidance, right?
Say at least
24 minimum residences.
half-mile
I think
residence?
the ordinance allows for 24 within a range of, or 500 feet, right? Isn't there a clause of the minimum number of residents that you have to hit even within your 500 feet radius?
I confess I don't know that, but I wanted to provide one more piece of data to the commission. There is a map inside the EIR that has a radius of 1,000 feet, and I apologize, I can't, oh, well. It's not really showing. But I would estimate there are between 20 and 30 houses within 1,000 feet. If you want to get a bigger range, you'll need probably 2,000 feet, and/or
A
give
minimum
staff
amount
the
of.
discretion to provide such additional noticing as.
Ensure to get the nearby elementary school.
Schools.
Data centers,
Data-
residents,
Yeah,
or I
this
mean,
will
day
be
schools.
centers, whatever you call
Yeah,
it.
that area there has,
Daycare.
so the closest to it has very high density in that area, because they have apartments and condominiums, and also senior housing is right there too.
So
Besides the
the best way
school.
to word that, will give staff, the motion to continue the project, giving staff the,
Discretion to select
Opportunity
an
to
appropriate
encompass-
radius to guarantee robust noticing.
Let's do 2,000 feet
No
for a
less than- no
recommendation
less than
for a
2,000
metric.
feet.
No less
Yeah.
than 2,000 feet.
Yep.
There you go.
And a minimum of 30 properties around, and/or 30 properties around.
From looking at that map, Sander, from looking at that map, does 2,000 feet encompass a heck of a lot more residential?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've nailed something.
Second.
So the motion on the floor is to continue the item to March 6th with additional direction to staff to notify properties within not less than 2,000 feet, and to include schools, daycares that fall within the proximity of this project.
I can just at the top of my head, I'll give it to you how it is. Bowers to Monroe, Monroe to South Circle, and back again to Bowers. That will cover all the area right around there.
That's way more than 2,000 feet. but
And that's the area that affects
what affects?
the data center,
that's a lot.
the noise.
It's a lot. Let's be
But-
reasonable.
No, that is reasonable. I'll love to drive you by there and you can see it.
Okay. We'll still take the motion. I recommend 2,000 feet as the not less than, and then leave it to the staff to
Staff's
reasonably, exactly, to reasonably do the outreach beyond 2,000 feet.
Okay, so
Second,
could you read back the
again.
motion as you feel we gave it to you?
The motion was to continue the project to March 6th and direct staff to renotice the project at a distance of not less than 2,000 feet and give staff discretion to provide additional noticing
Third,
And include schools and daycares.
and include schools and daycare centers.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second with clarification. We'd like to take a vote first on the existing
Sure.
motion.
Can you tell me again, was that you who made the motion, Priya?
No, Commissioner Boozer,
Okay.
seconded by Commissioner
No.
Biagini.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Commissioner
Sorry,
Eric,
Crutchlow.
Commissioner
Okay,
Biagini.
thank you.
And seconded by
me
Commissioner.
just a moment.
Thank you for correcting.
Okay, hold on. Seconded by,
Commissioner Biagini.
thank you.
Y'all come back now.
So not to make this confusing, I heard you originally say something about a community meeting, but you're not saying that, just
We're not.
noticing. Very
We're
good.
noticing
Just want to make
and-
sure. Okay.
What's within our control? How about that?
Please cast your vote.
So this is, again, staff. We'll see if staff has more responses. And then we'll take it up at the next notified public hearing.
Yes.
Yes, it's a continuance. And we appreciate the carpentry. If you'd like to represent.
Commissioner
again.
Biagini and Chair Kuru, please cast your vote.
Sorry.
Do we need to reopen public hearing?
We did not reopen, no.
Okay, thank you. And the motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your patience. Again, as you can see, this is a leading to how we are trying to establish a message out to City Council as well as to the city residents. Okay, moving to the last item for today's public hearing. We will now have the study session of our favorite topic, 2023 State Housing Legislation Update. I think this is our city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to confess, I drank a lot of coffee, so may I request a 5-minute recess?
Great timing, and coffee would not be the only reason, but we'll take that. We should give, I'm sorry, Commissioner Salem has a thought before we take a break.
One quick thought. Can we make sure that the deliberation that happened here is communicated to council so they understand that we're not just punting this down the road because we're in a bad mood tonight? No, we have reasons.
It won't be communicated to council until this is set for a council hearing. So after the March 6th meeting, then everything will be communicated in a report to council.
Okay, so it'll be a mystery to them until it happens. Got it. Thank you.
Or they can watch this. We will take a short break, 5 minutes, okay? 10 minutes?
Okay,
How
very
would we
good.
like to keep ourselves?
Okay, thank you.
Brenda, how long is your presentation?
What do you call 90 minutes.
at 8:24. We had about an 8-minute break. Thank you, staff. Moving to the next order again, it's the study session by Xander.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are just setting up the PowerPoint. All right. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Alexander Abbey. I'm the Assistant City Attorney. Tonight, we're continuing our annual tradition of going through the last year of housing legislation. As you know, a significant portion of the work you do involves housing development, and Santa Clara has had no shortage of it in recent years. 2023 did not have a lot of surprises, but did have some significant new bills. As usual, the legislature focused on how to make housing more affordable and how to increase the supply of housing. Many of the bills tonight, I think you will conclude, are reasonable and advance those goals. Some of them, I think you will find, are very heavy-handed, perhaps ill-advised, and further erode local control. Here are the topics we're going to be talking about. I try to keep it interesting. It's a legal presentation. You got to give me some credit. We're going to start.
You hit it.
Those
on the
are
head.
houses. Rotterdam. Sadly, they burned down in 2011. They no longer exist. But anyway, there's some innovative architecture, which I know you all appreciate. Among the housing topics we're going to discuss tonight are accessory dwelling units. Every year, the legislature loves to tinker with the ADU laws. This is no exception. Parking. You know there were some significant parking changes last year, and they added a few more this year. Streamlining. We're going to have 4 bills that help to make housing developments get through the pipeline much quicker. Density bonuses. More bonuses for more units. A few changes to CEQA relevant to certain types of housing projects, and then some new limitations on demolition of existing units. So those are the topics. Again, some of them are a little heavy. One of them is really dry. I like to start with something lighter, so let's ignore all of those and start with, instead, art. Artist housing. As you know, state law authorizes cities to enact inclusionary zoning ordinances, where the city requires developments to provide a certain percentage of their units to lower income households. And of course, in Santa Clara, we have a 15% inclusionary requirement. So if you built 200 dwellings, 30 of them would have to be available to lower income households. Our first bill of the evening, AB 812, modifies the legislation for inclusionary housing and says that in addition to reserving 15% for affordable households, the city can reserve up to 10% of the affordable units for artists. So in that 200 dwelling apartment building with 30 affordable units, the city could require that 3 of the 30 units be reserved for painters, sculptors, photographers, and performers. Performers are included, I'm happy to say. Now, this is totally optional, but it makes for some cities that have an arts district. I don't know why my slide is not appearing yet. Emeryville is a good example. They have a district they call Rotten City, actually, which has a bunch of art galleries. So, you know, it might make sense for them to use the bill because the area gets, as it gets more expensive, you don't want the artists to not be able to live in the area that they made so unique. But you can't do this citywide. It can only be done in locations that are within 1/2 mile of a designated cultural district. That's just a geographic area with a high concentration of cultural resources and activities. The state has designated 14 of those in the state. The city can also create its own district. So if we wanted to, we could create a cultural district and implement this bill. We'd have to adopt an ordinance also that had some specific provisions like, you know, defining artists more clearly, verifying annual income, verifying artist status, and then include a provision to prevent evicting current tenants in favor of artists. But anyway, I thought that was just an interesting way to start things off. I don't see this being at the top of the council's priority list, but maybe we'll have an art colony in Santa Clara. I think that'd be a nice addition.
That was my question. What's the definition of artist?
Well, yes, there is. The initial draft, well, skip the initial draft. It is the creator of any work of visual, graphic, or performing art of any media, including but not limited to painting, printing, drawing, sculpture, craft, photography, film, or performance. So the musicians get in there. Hypothetically speaking. Still need to. All right, now let's get into the meat and potatoes. Starting with ADUs. Accessory dwelling units, of course, are a relatively easy way to increase the stock of more affordable housing. Let me consult with my colleague for just a moment. Is there a way to make this smaller so I can see more of that, or do you think that's impossible? Oh, it's a good thing you were here. That is much better. Okay, accessory dwelling units. They are, of course, a relatively easy way to increase the stock of more affordable housing because ADUs are usually smaller units. They cost less to build, they cost less to own, they cost less to rent. There were 3 bills passed in the last year that are focused on continuing to make ADUs more affordable. The first of those bills is AB 1332. One of the main barriers to creating an ADU is that it requires many hours of research to find the right architect to design the ADU and many thousands of dollars to develop the plans for the ADU. So to address this, AB 1332 requires all cities to establish a program with pre-approved designs for ADUs by January 1st, 2025. Basically, the state wants us to have an online catalog of pre-approved plans that anyone can select from. The city's required to post this catalog on the city's website, and each plan that we post would then contain the contact information of the designer of that plan, and then anyone that wants to build one of these units can reach out to the designer to license it. So it's just a way to reduce the cost of getting these plans. Yes? Mike?
Does this include prefabbed ADUs such that we could designate manufacturers that are automatically approved because they have gone through testing and certification?
Well, this specific bill only addresses the design. So if we wanted to include designs that are designs of manufacturers also, we could absolutely include that. It's going to be discretionary which plans we want to put on our website. Hopefully we'll have a variety so not every single ADU in the city looks the same. But sure, we could make that one of the policy choices. If you use one of these pre-approved plans, it speeds up the process also. The city will have to expedite the approval process. This is reduced from 60 days to 30 days. So it was already a snappy pace. This will make it even faster.
Would it, question, wouldn't this start a frenzy of almost we becoming their advertising portal for designers and, which we've historically, public agencies are not allowed to share any specific.
Right. Well, I'm sure a lot of designers would very much like to have their designs on our website, but it is left up to the city to select which designs they choose. This is one area where we will still have architectural control in the residential context. So the city can just simply make architectural design choices. These are the, 20 types of ADUs that we're going to pre-approve.
But are they based on objectives? You can get sued?
It would only be if we denied a permit for some prescribed reason, like, oh, well, that designer's a member of a certain religious group. But keep in mind, this is just to facilitate quick building of ADUs. You can still go through the regular process, hire your own architect, not use a pre-approved plan. You don't have to use one of these. It's just, here are some that we've looked at. We know if you build it, it's going to be safe, it's appropriate for our community. Have at it, and it'll save you money. Okay, next ADU bill. This is another one where the legislature's trying to keep ADUs affordable. they are prohibiting cities from requiring that ADUs be owner-occupied. In other words, the city has to continue to allow ADUs to be rented. This was actually already on the books, but the law was going to expire in 2025, and cities were going to have to start requiring ADUs to be exclusively owner-occupied. So after this bill, that's not going to be allowed. We can still require that junior ADUs under 500 square feet and attached to the primary dwelling, must be owner-occupied. But for full-size ADUs and detached ADUs, we have to allow them to be rented. Importantly, we do still have the authority to prohibit short-term rentals, Airbnbs, in ADUs. So if you recall, it was just last month when you reviewed the draft zoning code, and you added language that specifically prohibited ADUs from being used as Airbnbs or other forms of short-term rentals. The City Council approved your language, and it's in the new zoning ordinance. Finally, we have AB 1033. One of the reasons that ADUs are being pushed so hard by the state is that they're an easy way to increase the number of rental units on the market. It's not surprising that a lot of cities want to prohibit separate sale or conveyance of ADUs from the primary dwelling because you want to preserve that rental opportunity. But there's also been recognition that for a lot of people, an ADU might be the best way to enter the home ownership market. You know what median home prices are, and statewide only 17% of households can afford a regularly sized home. So this bill authorizes, but does not require, cities to adopt an ordinance to permit the separate sale of primary dwellings and ADUs, to basically break up a single-family lot into a common lot with 2 condos. The condos would be created through the traditional mapping process. Importantly, you'd need the consent of any lien holders, which means the mortgage companies. Also, if the house is in an area covered by an HOA, the HOA would have to consent. So it may not be that simple to get a mortgage company to consent to, breaking up your property into condos. But it's an option that the city has available to it if they want to start encouraging ownership of ADUs. That's everything I have for ADUs, not quite as much as some prior years. I'm sure they'll continue fiddling with the ADU laws every year. Are there any questions on ADUs before I move on to the next topic? Okay, then let's dive into parking. Thank you. It's fun to search for them. The challenge is finding something that's interesting and also public domain.
You may qualify for the artist house.
Am I going to get to live in the colony? If you were here, you may remember the legislature took away most of our authority last year to require parking. If a development project is located within a half mile of a major transit stop, as of last year, we can no longer impose any minimum parking requirements. A major transit stop, again, is a train station or the intersection of 2 bus lines with short headways. The planners put this map together showing everything within a half mile of a major transit stop. And as you can see, it is a significant portion of the city. It's all those blue shaded areas where we can no longer require any parking for any kind of development. Where parking is put in, we can still require that they meet dimensional requirements and that a percentage be for EV spaces, which is what we require in our REACH code. But you're probably wondering, what's next? Are they going to prohibit parking in all the unshaded areas now? No, they didn't go that far, but they did chip at it a little more. So our next 3 bills really only concern the unshaded areas. And so the first one of those is AB 1308. It was brought forward to help reduce the cost of housing and increase the supply of available units, and also because of a concern that there's an oversupply of parking spaces. Under this bill, the city cannot require any additional parking for remodeling, renovating, or adding to single-family dwellings. Now, the single-family dwellings would still have to comply with other zoning regulations like, maximum height and lot coverage, but if they're missing a required parking spaces and they want to expand their house, the city cannot require them to add the space anymore. So in Santa Clara, until recently, we had a long-standing policy that said if you have a house with a 1-car garage and you want to expand that house, then you have to add a second covered parking space unless the expansion was only less than 500 square feet. In our new zoning ordinance, we just changed that standard. Now, the new zoning code says that for expansions of homes with one-car garage, you can go up to 1,000 square feet without having to add that second covered parking space. But that's going to be a very short-lived regulation, because after AB 1308, if a homeowner wants to remodel or expand, we can't require them to add any additional parking spaces, regardless of the size of the addition. So in the cleanup ordinance you will be seeing later this spring, we're going to have to take that out entirely. If you have a legal non-conforming one-car garage and you want to expand your house, that is all you're going to need. Commissioner Salim.
So you are saying then that if somebody takes a one-car, two-bedroom home and builds a McMansion of like 5 bedrooms, 3,500 square feet,
Plus an ADU.
plus an ADU, one parking spot?
Yes.
That's what I was afraid of.
I have the popcorn now.
I mean, the reason I'm hesitating a little is because, as you know, there's limitations on what we can do for architectural design now for residential uses, but I believe the rule only applies to 2 or more dwellings. I may be uncertain. Oh, well, but you just said an ADU. It's likely they'll get to build their McMansion. Commissioner
Alexander, if they convert their garage into a room, would they still be required to have a parking space? Or
Well,
you consider the driveway a parking space?
No, our city code requirement is that you have 2 covered parking spaces. So you can't eliminate your garage for another room. You can eliminate your garage to build an ADU because state law requires that. So they could put an ADU in their garage and wouldn't have to replace the parking.
They can just call it an ADU attached to the residence then?
Well, it's not just call it, it's also, has to have its own bathroom and a small kitchen. But if they can throw those 2 things in there, no replacement parking.
This is a typical Portuguese house.
So that's how parking changed for single-family residences. Let's talk about multi-family residences. And for that, we have AB 1317, which deals with unbundled parking. So in your traditional apartment building, you have a lease of a specific dwelling unit, and it usually comes with 1 or 2 parking spaces. But you've probably heard the term unbundling used a lot, particularly as a TDM measure. The idea is to, if somebody's not going to use a parking space, they shouldn't have to pay for it as part of their lease. And then also forcing them to have a parking space may encourage them to purchase cars and use less transit. So AB 1317 now requires that multifamily dwellings must unbundle parking and rent. To the extent parking is required or provided, it has to be leased through a separate document, not as part of the main rental agreement. So tenants get to lease their parking separate from their unit. Now, this only applies to buildings with more than 15 dwelling units. There was a concern in drafting this legislation that smaller properties especially might really suffer if they lose the revenue from the parking spaces. Also, it only applies to new buildings that receive a certificate of occupancy after January 1st, 2025. So the bill does not impose any obligations on existing properties. The bill does impose an order of priority in leasing spaces. So of course, the tenants would have the first priority to lease the spaces, but then unused spaces could be leased to other on-site users, or if they don't want it, to off-site users on a month-to-month basis. Commissioner.
So 2025, they put in a sixplex. I'm trying to, it was like that back east when I was there, right? You had all these condos and you had parking spots, but if you wanted a parking spot, you had to pay extra for it. Is that what this is getting to?
Yes.
So you can build a sixplex and maybe there's only 3 parking spots. So what, who cares? If you want one of the 3, you better be willing to pay, and if 3 of the 6 have already paid for it, you're out?
There are some nuances there. First of all, we're only talking about the white area of the city, not the blue area. In the blue area, we can't control how many of the spaces there are.
Right.
In the white area, we still have control, and we still require 2 spaces per unit. So they'd have to provide the 12 units. 12 spaces. Secondly, this bill only applies to buildings that have 15 dwelling units or more. So the
Okay, oh,
sixplex
right,
you
that's
mentioned
right, that's
would
right,
not be
okay,
subject
greater
to this.
than, okay.
So a 16-plex would be subject to this, but importantly, not 16 townhomes, because if it's a design of a house that has dedicated spaces built into the unit, like a townhouse, this bill does not apply. It also contains a clause that says you can't evict a tenant for failing to pay their parking fees. You can evict them if they fail to pay the rent, but if they fail to pay the parking, you can't kick them out of their unit. You can revoke their parking spot. And again, there are exemptions for townhomes. There's also exemptions for 100% affordable developments and certain properties receiving government financial incentives. I sense at least one commissioner is somewhat concerned about this bill. I should note that this is a pilot program. It only applies in 10 specific counties because I think the legislature wanted to see how it works before they roll it out statewide. But one of those counties is the county of Santa Clara, and so we are subject to it as a city in that county. Unbundling, in theory, I think it allows tenants to purchase parking only when needed, so it increases housing affordability if they don't have to pay for the parking. The argument against is that renters will want to save money, but still have a car, so they'll just park on the street, and soon the streets will quickly be overloaded. So we will see how this experiment works in Santa Clara.
Is there an, this almost feels like a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there a affordability rate for parking? I mean, I could see it that if you get some apartment, right, 16-unit building, and you're paying $3,000 a month, is there something that says the builder can say, yeah, and that parking space you want, that's another $2,000 or $3,000 a month?
Rent control is their parking.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, that is not currently a part of any of the affordability
Okay, that'll be next
bills.
year's bill. Okay.
Yes. Don't give the legislature ideas.
So can I ask you one other question about that? This is not the parking. I kind of, this all of a sudden hit me.
Yeah.
When you said that ADUs can be considered as condos?
Yes, well, the city now has the power to adopt an ordinance allowing a division of a lot so that the ADU and the main house are separate condominium units.
Okay, so does the Davis-Sterling Act then apply?
Yes.
So I have one ADU, we need a board.
We need a...
You have to have a board and have all sorts of things that go with condominium associations.
Well, there's a shared lot. So
Getting the shared lot, like the Davis-Sterling Act, you have to have a board, you have to have your rules, you have to
there
do...
may be an exception under Davis-Sterling if
So
there's only
maybe
two
later,
lots.
because this is going to be so much fun to hear later on, does the Davis-Sterling Act apply? I would think that they would be smart enough to say, no, these conditions don't really apply. This is kind of a modified condominium. Otherwise, it'll be a lot of fun.
Okay,
But
I
one
will
thing
find out.
about the parking, actually, I'm happy that we're part of that program in the sense that, okay, if they realize that this could be a problem, we now have a say.
Absolutely, and that's why, how long is the pilot period?
It doesn't have a specific end date. It's
What?
until the legislature enacts another bill. Well, and that's how it would work. It's not,
I know, but isn't there like a if you're trying to really pilot, there's a time frame to get the data back. So you could pilot all what you want, and Santa Clara County is the only one implicated then with trying to redeem ourselves from any parking. And how do we continue to, how does the responses from the community, cities get to legislature?
May I suggest it would come to the legislature at the time that they run for reelection?
Ooh, not the entire.
You could have enough people that are mad about it that I think the legislature would, consider it. And of course, bodies like ourselves would definitely have an impact in talking to the legislature, saying, hey, look, this really is not working.
So there has to be then a consistent no from every project that professes, less than reasonable parking.
Yep.
And until the vote is no, then it doesn't become part of the metric.
There you go. And they may say, okay, since we allowed it now, we're not going to go ahead and, we're going to grandfather it in.
Yeah, well, 15 cities.
The
bill is not long. I've just skimmed it. There is no sunset clause.
So only Santa Clara County is going to go through this experiment.
No, 10.
And 9 others, 9 others.
Oh, okay.
We're not alone.
Okay.
We have,
Yeah, those that have the most parking demand, literally.
perhaps we should move on. One other parking bill, let's talk about sharing. It provides for shared parking upon requests from owners of underutilized sites. Underutilized means at least 20% of the spaces are vacant at the time of the proposed sharing. The city would need to count those off-site parking spaces toward the parking requirements for existing or proposed uses. The sites have to be in proximity, meaning it's the same site or they're contiguous parcels, or there's some sort of plan for shuttles, and the developer can demonstrate a commitment to sustain the shuttles. The owners have to submit a shared parking agreement for the city's review and a parking analysis that demonstrates the benefits of such an arrangement. This parking analysis, well, they can do it any way they want, but if they use one of 3 peer-reviewed methodologies, and that means by the Urban Land Institute or the National Parking Association or the International Council of Shopping Centers, if they show this analysis that it will work, the city doesn't have any discretion. We have to approve such a shared parking arrangement. If the parking analysis is based on other methodologies, we do have discretion.
So to be clear, the parties that want that shared parking are the ones that have to make that. The parties that want to make the shared parking have to make the proposal. So if like one person says, yeah, I don't want anything to do with this, you can't force it on them.
No, you can't force this on anyone. It would be, somebody wants to build something on a site and doesn't have enough parking, or has an existing site with insufficient parking, wants, his next door neighbor's got extra, so he just wants to share it. That's how he's going to satisfy his meager remaining parking obligations in the city code, by entering into this sharing agreement.
Is that underutilized, intended for mixed-use site combination, or where most of our blue circles are is going to be in the suburbans? Is it housing projects to housing projects?
It doesn't limit it to specific uses.
So you technically, okay, understood. I was just trying to see the graphic.
Yeah, that's just something I found on the web. That's not what didn't come with the bill, but I don't see anything in the bill limiting it. They do specifically name historic sites as something that would be eligible for this. They didn't need to name it, but makes sense, because if you got a historic structure, you don't want to have to knock down half of it to put in parking spaces. So it seems like a ideal use for it. It also doesn't affect disabled parking requirements, which makes sense because they have to be right near the building, so you don't want to do those offsite. And to the extent we have EV space requirements, they still have to provide those. Yeah, Santa Clara actually already allows for shared parking. We are a little ahead of the times on that one. We started authorizing it in 2010 when we built a certain assembly use that would require some off-site parking. But we didn't make it only apply to Levi Stadium. We applied it to all non-residential and mixed-use developments. So AB 894 does go further to our ordinance because it also applies to residential developments. So now, if a residential property owner submits a shared parking agreement based on peer-reviewed methodologies, we will have to start allowing shared parking arrangements even for residential sites.
So let me, it's only allowing as an amenity, it's not requiring, like City of Mountain View, which has like a parking garage every other shopping complex, proximity to housing, we're not mandating that kind of a parking structure now be allowed for its residents.
No, I mean, that's private property. The owner of that parking garage would absolutely have to consent to that, would have to enter into a contract.
What about city parking structures?
We're not required to enter into a shared parking agreement. No, certainly not. Okay, and that's all for parking. Let's move on to streamlining. We had 4 streamlining bills this year. And they all had a common theme. They all provide for ministerial approval of certain kinds of housing projects, meaning no CEQA review is required and no public hearings are allowed. Most of them require developers to provide extra percentages of affordable units, but not all of them. And most of them require developers to build at higher densities, but not all of them. Most of them have site sensitivity limitations, partly for the benefit of the sites, by trying to preserve farmlands, although we don't have any of those left, but also to protect sensitive environmental habitats like wetlands. But they're also meant to protect the tenants. We don't want to put our affordable housing on hazardous material sites in high-risk flood zones next to an oil refinery with severe fire hazards. So our first bill is Senate Bill 423. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention also, I've got these funny little letters here. I discovered when I was trying to put this presentation together that a lot of the words I want to use related to labor were way too cluttering. So a lot of the bills have labor provisions where they will only give you the streamlining if you provide certain rights to the workers. First and foremost, the bills require that developers pay prevailing wages. Some also require the use of a skilled and trained workforce where the workers, either graduated from an apprenticeship program or the workers have sufficient on-the-job experience that would be required to graduate from an apprenticeship program. Some of the bills now require that the contractors participate in a state-sponsored apprenticeship program. And significantly, some of the bills require that the workers get health care. And that's a lot of words. So I'm just going to use these 4 little subway icons instead of spelling it all out for each bill. P is prevailing wage, S, skilled and trained workforce, A, apprenticeship programs, and H, healthcare. Some of these bills require these things now. So, first of the 4 bills, SB 423, introduced by Scott Wiener, makes changes to an older streamlining bill, SB 35, which was enacted in 2017. Some of you were on the commission in 2017, but if you weren't or you want a refresher, let me remind you what SB 35 did. I can hear some muttering, and I share your concern. SB 35 provides a ministerial approval process for certain kinds of affordable housing projects. First, the projects have to be on a site that's residential in either the zoning ordinance or the general plan, and the project has to meet the objective standards of that zone before any waivers. Second, the site couldn't be historic or wetlands or hazmats or most of the other sensitive sites I mentioned earlier. It also couldn't require a subdivision and couldn't require the demolition of any existing units. There were labor requirements. All SB 35 projects had to pay workers prevailing wages, that's the P. For projects with 50 dwelling units or more, they had to use a skilled and trained workforce, that's the S. And finally, the projects had to be X% affordable. SB 35 had a sunset date of 2026. It was going to be automatically repealed in just 2 more years. So obviously I left out the most important piece of information. What is X? Well, the percentage of affordability depends on how well the city is doing in achieving its housing element goals, or RHNA. And to explain that, I need to again use the bucket analogy that I've mentioned in prior years. The state has divided the 482 cities of California into 3 buckets. Depending on which bucket the city falls into, the city has to ministerially approve any housing project where either 50% of the units are affordable or just 10% of the units are affordable. If you're in that leftmost bucket, you're not subject to SB 35 at all. I should also mention that the rightmost bucket, it's for 10% low-income housing, but a developer also has the option of building 20% moderate income housing. Which bucket you fall into depends on whether the city is on track to achieve their RHNA goals in all categories, or whether they're on track to achieve market rate housing, but not affordable housing, or whether you're on track for none of those categories, neither market rate nor affordable. Now, as you know, Santa Clara has built a lot of housing in the last several years. You may have heard recently that we authorized 12,000 units in a certain part of the city, way more than what the RHNA requires. But most of it has been above market. We haven't been on track to achieving our lower income targets. And so for the last few years, Santa Clara has been in the middle bucket. We have been achieving our market rate RENA, but not the lower RENA. Anyway, all of that is what SB 35. All I've been doing is just setting the stage for you. I haven't even gotten to the new bill. So in 2023, the legislature amended SB 35 with this new bill, SB 423. And guess what they did to the applicable bucket? As of January 1st, Santa Clara is now in the third bucket. And the reason for that is you now get put into the third bucket, not just because you're not on track to achieve your low-income RENA, but also because you have an uncertified housing element. And as you guys know, we have now adopted several versions of our 2023 to 2031 housing element, but HCD has so far declined to give us certification. We believe our housing element is substantially compliant with the law, and we're hopeful we will soon get certification. But under SB 423, you need actual certification from HCD. And until we get that certification, we are a third bucket city. So what that means is that any housing development project that is at least 10% affordable and meets the other requirements now has to be approved ministerially. And of course, Santa Clara has an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires at least 15% of units to be affordable if you're building 10 or more units. So every housing development project with at least 10 units will qualify for SB 423 streamlining until we get certification. Now, I should mention the legislature did modify the labor requirements. So in order to take advantage of the streamlining, a developer still has to pay prevailing wages. That still applies to all projects, and that's one of the major barriers for all developers rushing in and doing this. SB 35 already required the use of a skilled and trained workforce, that's the S, but under SB 423, that will now only apply to projects that are more than 85 feet in height. More significantly, for projects with 50 or more dwelling units, they added a requirement that the project has an apprenticeship program, that's the A, and that they pay their workers health care, that's the H. SB 423 extended the sunset of the streamlining law. So now, instead of expiring in 2026, it expires in 2036. So it will be around for quite some time. That's the biggest of the streamlining laws. If you don't have questions, I can move on to the next one, or if you just want to sit and feel the pain, we can set up a support group. All right. Here's another bill introduced by Senator Scott Wiener, same senator as the last one. And this applies to land either owned by a religious institution or an educational institution, as long as they own the land prior to January 1st, 2024. In order to qualify for the streamlining, a project has to be 100% affordable, 80% low, or 20% moderate. A project that's 100% affordable and built on land owned by an educational or religious institution gets ministerial approval, no secret review, no hearings. In addition to the 100% affordability, they can reserve up to 5% of the units for the staff of the institution. There are also labor requirements for this one. If the project will build more than 10 dwelling units, they have to pay prevailing wages. And if the development will build more than 50 units, they have to do an apprenticeship program and provide health care. And then there's site restrictions on this one as well. You can't be near industrial sites, oil refineries, and can't be on farmlands, et cetera.
Do they define religious institutions?
Yes. A religious institution is a bona fide church, religious denomination, or religious organization lawfully operating as a nonprofit religious corporation.
Suggestions, if they want to build houses there, the school, build them. St. Lawrence.
And just FYI, the higher education institutions are non-public institutions that issue undergraduate and graduate degrees that are accredited by agencies recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. So only Santa Clara University would qualify for this. Like all ministerial approval processes, this is exempt.
Just a clarification
Yes.
on the previous.
Yes.
Basically, we are saying university housing doesn't have to go through discretionary approval.
Correct. Housing built on land that was owned by a CU prior to January 1st of this year. It doesn't have to be housing for the university, it just has to be housing with this affordability level.
Thank you.
Will be exempt from CEQA. Notably, they call out the subdivision process as also being exempt. Normally, the granting of a subdivision would be a discretionary act, but here we've got you could have a 50-unit condo with no CEQA. We can only require 1 parking space per unit for projects built on this land. And most of the zoning ordinance and general plan standards are inapplicable, except there's a maximum height of 1 story above whatever the zoning designation is. There's a streamlined review for these projects, depending on the size, either 90 days or 180 days. Also, I should note that you can also build some ancillary uses. If they're building it on residential property that's zoned residential, you can also put in a child care center. If you're building it on property that's not zoned residential, you can put in commercial uses. So this gives a lot of authority to religious and educational institutions. On to the next streamlining bill. One innovative method of development that's been used more and more in recent years is the idea of adaptive reuse. Taking an old building, repurposing it for another use while preserving the building for its historic or architectural features, or just because it makes sense from a financial perspective. So AB 1490 promotes the adaptive reuse of buildings for affordable housing. 100% affordable buildings that adaptively reuse existing buildings are an allowable use regardless of any inconsistencies between the project and the general plan or zoning. Now, note that this doesn't say the building has to be historic. It's just adaptive reuse of any old building. And this applies to existing residential buildings. It also applies to commercial buildings that currently allow temporary dwelling or occupancy, like a hotel or motel. So this is very similar to the home key program that, a couple projects were introduced in the city under that program, where developers could take an old motel and turn it into temporary housing. In that case here, this is a process to take an old motel and turn it into permanent housing. Now, the development does have to be entirely within the existing envelope of a building. So I put the picture of the Bella Vista project, since that took an old motel and repurposed the motel, and then there's this plan to build this separate building right next to it. Under this, you can only take the existing building and expand. You can't build a separate building next to it. And again, this only applies to 100% affordable projects. And it's a steep degree of affordability, 50% low, 50% very low. But if you meet those requirements, you can ignore most of our zoning requirements, including density, parking, and open space.
Can you do this with office buildings?
Well, it's interesting, because I read the statement of the author of the bill explaining what the purpose of the bill was, and explaining how there are all these underutilized buildings, like office buildings. But then they said, but actually the floor plate of office buildings isn't very practical for most residential, because you need windows in every unit. And so in the end, the final version of the bill only applied to existing residential buildings and commercial buildings that apply to temporary occupancy. So I think the original vision for the bill maybe was bigger than the final version. So.
When is a building considered temporary occupancy building?
I think we just call them hotels and motels.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So non.
They're already made for occupancy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Notably, there are no labor requirements for this bill. There aren't many site restrictions, except for whatever reason, they say you can't be on or immediately next to industrial sites.
Just to confirm, the adaptive reuse is very different from the historic Secretary of Interior standards for adaptive reuse. That was where I went.
Entirely
original.
different. After I wrote this, I thought I should have come up with another term, but that's what they used in the bill, so. All right, that's all for that one. One other streamlining bill, SB 684. In multifamily zones, there's now going to be a ministerial approval process for subdivisions that will result in 10 or fewer parcels and 10 or fewer dwelling units. Once again, that means exempt from CEQA, no public hearings. The city will have no discretion to deny such developments except for health and safety reasons. The minimum density for these projects is whatever's in the housing element, if it's a site that's identified in the housing element. If it's not a site that's identified in the housing element, then you have to build it at 30 dwelling units per acre. It also says if you don't have a certified housing element, it's 30 dwelling units per acre. So for now, 30 dwelling units per acre. There are also some parcel size requirements. You can't do this to a parcel that's larger than 5 acres. And once you're done with subdividing, you can't have anything smaller than 600 square feet. There's also a maximum unit size, 1,750 habitable square feet, so no McMansions with this bill. Unlike the other streamlining bills, there's no affordability requirement. They can just comply with the city's inclusionary ordinance and leave it at that. And there's no labor language. The city will only have 60 days to review such projects. Now, ordinarily, if you're dividing a parcel into 10 smaller parcels, you need both Planning Commission and City Council approval and public hearings. So this significantly is going to modify the subdivision process for these types of developments, and we will have to modify our subdivision ordinance as a result. Maybe in recognition of that, this bill actually doesn't take effect until July 1st. But on July 1st, you'll start seeing ministerial subdivisions of 10 lots. Density bonuses. As you know, state law provides that if a developer provides a certain percentage of dwelling units at rents or sale prices that are affordable to lower income households, the developer is entitled to a density bonus, as well as waivers and concessions of certain development standards. The more affordable units a developer provides and the deeper level of affordability, the higher the density bonus and the greater the incentives. Most years, the legislature tinkers with the density bonus law, and it's always in the same way. They increase the bonuses the developer can get, and they increase the number of incentives to which a developer is entitled. This was no exception this year, so if you'd like to go to your special place for the next 90 seconds, I will try to breeze through this. Here's what what the density bonus law provided in 2023. I'm skipping ahead. Okay. There's 3 categories of affordable housing that can result in a density bonus: very low, low, and moderate. If a developer provides 5% very low income units, they get a bonus of 20%. They also get one incentive. An incentive is asking the city to not impose a setback requirement or allow an increase in the maximum height. For low income, you got to provide 10% of the units for affordable households to get that same 20% bonus and one incentive. For moderate income, you provide 10% of the units for affordable levels, but you only get a 5% bonus and one incentive. If you provide a higher percentage, you get a higher density bonus and more incentives. So here's what happens if, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner?
One question?
Yes.
It's like you gave an example of eliminating setback.
Yes.
Is that to dismiss the objections of neighbors that may suddenly have a wall at their property line? They have no say, the neighbors that are affected?
It could be used for that purpose.
Okay, thank you.
There's incentives and there are waivers. This column here, and I'll just advance to the next slide, it gives you a certain number of incentives depending on how many units you provide. Incentives are supposed to make the project more affordable. So if this will bring the cost of the project down or will, give them a higher profit margin so that they can afford to build more units, then it's an incentive. A waiver, on the other hand, is something that's necessary to fit the project onto the site. So, if a setback is so severe that they simply can't build at the density that they're legally required to build at, they get a waiver. We fight back hard on waivers because, unlike incentives, there's no limit to waivers. They can request 1 million waivers. They just have to say, but there's no way I can build, and we're like, your units are 5,000 square feet each. Can't you just make them 4,000? No, that doesn't pencil out, So we have a lot of really painful discussions with developers over waivers. We try to push them almost exclusively into incentives because you could just redesign it. Well, you're not allowed to ask us to redesign. Well, I just did. So all of these density bonuses have a maximum bonus, at least they did in 2023. In each of these categories, you never get a density bonus greater than 50%. I'll also mention the special rules for housing developments where every unit is affordable. Those are 100% affordable developments. Some people call this the super density bonus because for these, there's an infinite density bonus if you're within a half mile of a major transit stop. You can build as dense as you want, although you can't build a skyscraper. You can't go more than 3 stories above the maximum height of the zone. If you're not within a half mile of transit, then you only get an 80% density bonus. And for those 100% affordable developments, you get 4 incentives. Yes.
Regarding the incentives and the bonus, can one developer sell the incentive, the bonuses to another developer?
No, I'm not aware of any mechanism by which, I mean, every incentive is project specific. It's like, can this project?
Right, but, well, is it only in that project he's doing, or can he use it in another project?
No. It's exclusive to one.
Just on that, exclusive on that project that he's doing? Okay.
Yes. So again, there's a maximum density bonus of 50%, which I highlighted here, at least there was in 2023. So if the developer ever hits the maximum percentage of affordable units, there's no drive for them to ever go higher than that. So what changed this year? Well, I already gave the spoiler. If you've already hit the 50% max, you can now get a separate second density bonus between 20 and 50%. And this is what it looks like. It's an entirely separate table that you don't use until you max out the first table. In the second table, if you provide additional units in either the very low or moderate categories, you get additional bonuses. And you can mix and match these. You could, a developer could qualify for the density bonus with the low income units in the first table, and then when he hits the maximum, get the second bonus by providing the very low income units in the second table. So with this bill, you could see density bonuses as high as 100%. If you max out both kinds of bonuses. This bill also changes the number of incentives. Back to the earlier chart, again, you get 1 to 4 incentives. And the max was 3 for the main 3 categories as of last year. They've now increased that to 4 incentives by just providing 1 extra percentage point for either very low or moderate income housing. And if you have a 100% affordable development, you now get 5 incentives. So I apologize for all the numbers. If you were not with me for the last 2 minutes, this would be a good time to come back.
I am not in my happy space.
I called the commission meeting back to order.
And for that, we thank you. That is all you need to know about density bonuses this year. Now let's move on to what happens with environmental review when you build all of these houses. There were 3 bills relevant to CEQA and housing in the last year. Earlier, I told you about the 100% ministerial process for 100% affordable, Earlier, I told you about the ministerial approval for 100% affordable housing on the land of religious and educational institutions, and also the adaptive reuse that was for 100% affordable housing. Those developments don't need any CEQA because they're ministerial, but other 100% affordable projects do need CEQA. So here's a way that other developers of 100% affordable housing can avoid CEQA review, and that's AB 1449. The legislature has created a new statutory exemption, and it's relatively uncomplicated. If you provide 100% affordable housing and it's low income, and you're in an urbanized area, all of Santa Clara is an urbanized area, or you're near transit, and you don't violate any of the site restrictions, the usual things like wetlands, and you're not near a freeway or an oil refinery, and you provide prevailing wage, that's our P again, and for over 50 dwelling units, you provide an apprenticeship program and health care, then you are exempt from CEQA. So it's just another way 100% affordable developments can get around the CEQA process. This does have a sunset of January 2033. Now, here's a heavier one. AB 1633 amends the Housing Accountability Act, the HAA. As you're probably aware, the HAA prohibits a city from disapproving most housing development projects that are consistent with the general plan under a variety of circumstances. And the term disapproval doesn't just mean saying no to a project, it also includes approving a project, but at a reduced density or on a smaller scale. It penalizes the city also if we don't meet certain firm deadlines. There are exceptions where we can make findings that health and safety are adversely affected, but those are rare. We've never made them in Santa Clara. And there are severe penalties for HAA violations, like $10,000 per dwelling unit that we failed to approve, and an aggrieved developer can recover attorney's fees. So NR 1633, AB 1633, it modifies this HAA to add CEQA determinations to the list of things that can constitute disapprovals. Now, if we don't make a CEQA determination in a timely manner, that can constitute a disapproval that would violate the HAA. The bill gives a developer a process to protest the city's inaction or its actual CEQA decisions and sue under the Housing Accountability Act if its protest is not resolved in its favor. This applies to adopting an MND, certifying an EIR, or issuing an exemption. Let me just put the rest of the bullets up. When it comes to an MND or an EIR, the bill says we have to have substantial evidence to require additional review. So sometimes, hypothetically speaking, you'll see a project and you'll say, you know what, I need more information before I can make a decision. Let's continue this to a future meeting. But sometimes this happens on an environmental document. You say, you know, we simply don't have enough information on geologic impacts. There needs to be a study of geologic impacts before we can make a clear determination on this. Go do a study on geologic impacts. But you now need substantial evidence to make that decision to defer. So this is a little challenging because we've just said there's not enough evidence, but the bill says you have to have substantial evidence to make that call. So is it enough to just say, we don't think there's enough here? But much worse than that, the last bullet point, the city's decision not to issue an exemption. We routinely get into disputes with developers as to whether or not a development project qualifies for an exemption. Developers invariably want to avoid the time and cost of preparing an environmental document, and they tell the city their project definitely qualifies for an exemption, you know? So outside the housing context, you know, I had to deal with a billboard company that wanted to put up, you know, enormous billboard, something like 14 by 60, you know, next to the freeway. And they said they wanted to use the small structures exemption. And I said, it's not small. And they said, yes, it is, it's small. It's a tiny little billboard. No, it's not. Do the MND. Ultimately, they had to acquiesce because the city has the authority to make the determination of whether an exemption applies. The city is the lead agency, not the developer. But now, this is a very unpleasant reversal. If the city decides not to use an exemption on a housing project, then the protest, somebody can file a protest and the city has to have substantial evidence. And I'm sorry, if the protester has substantial evidence that he's entitled to the exemption, then the city has to use the exemption. The substantial evidence standard usually means that, you know, as long as the city has evidence in the record, it doesn't matter that somebody else brings in contradictory evidence. If we have relied upon evidence, we can exercise our judgment and we can make a rational decision. But this says if the protester has substantial evidence, which usually means they've hired a hack to issue an opinion, an informed opinion about their project being entitled to an exemption, we have to grant the exemption. So I'm sorry to belabor this so much. It's just, I think it's such a bad bill. I don't know how much of this is accurate, but supposedly this sprung out of a decision of the actions of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 2021. They reviewed an EIR for a 500 dwelling unit project, and they decided not to certify an EIR, and they required additional studies. And the developer claimed that, well, the board was doing this as a backhanded way of disapproving the project. They said that, so, you know, it's not fair that they disapproved the project by requiring additional environmental review. And so the bill's author described this bill as a way to address when a city wrongfully denies a project by laundering the denial through the false pretenses of environmental review, and make sure that the city is subject to the same penalties that would apply if the city illegally denied the project by other means. So I have no idea whether San Francisco actually did what they say and, tried to do this backhand denial of a project. I suspect the facts are not quite what was described. But regardless, those are the facts that the legislature relied upon, and this is a situation where bad facts make bad law, because we've lost the power to decide whether or not an exemption applies to residential projects.
Question.
Yes.
How much precedence beside what you just described defines what substantial evidence would be in this case?
Well, there's an extensive body of law on substantial evidence. I'd have to research it a bit more to get you, a coherent answer. But as an example, we routinely get comment letters on our environmental documents from labor unions. Labor unions use the environmental process, as you know, to get project labor agreements out of developers that don't want to pay prevailing wages. They routinely provide, 20-page analyses by experts they have on staff, and there's no question that those by themselves would constitute substantial evidence. Now, invariably, we also have our own experts to contradict that. But, where's the line between, a drawing on a napkin and a report that constitutes substantial evidence? That's hard to say, but it's not far. You can get to substantial evidence fairly quickly.
When I say precedence, what I mean is how many court cases have gone on where the court said, this is what we say is substantial evidence?
I believe there's a lot. There's a substantial body of law on what constitutes substantial evidence, because it applies not just in this context. A lot of
right,
a lot of areas of law deal with it.
Can you name one in the city that you recently dealt with?
What, a substantial evidence court case? No, not off the top of my head. But I can look into that some more if you'd like.
Knock on wood, we won't have
Let's
to.
move on.
Yep, move on.
All right. Thank you, Chair. On a lighter note, another bill that sprung out of a specific incident involving a Bay Area city was AB 1307, and it deals with noise impacts under CEQA. As you know, one of the resource areas we look at in our environmental analyses is noise. And the most typical question is, well, if there's mechanical equipment on top of a building, is it going to be so loud that it will affect the neighboring properties? It's typically a factor for industrial uses, backup generators. But it can spring up in many other contexts. When we approved an MND for a new roller coaster at Great America, we analyzed how loud the screams would be. Well, screams are exactly what were at issue in Berkeley last year, because UC Berkeley wanted to build student housing, and they certified an EIR for that housing, but project opponents challenged it, saying that the students would be too noisy. They said that UC Berkeley should have also considered alternate locations for the housing. And the Court of Appeal agreed with the project opponents. They said Berkeley had to redo the EIR. Now, that case is still active. It's been appealed to the California Supreme Court. But in the meantime, the legislature stepped in and they passed AB 1307. And it says that for residential projects, the effects of noise generated by project occupants and their guests on human beings is not a significant effect on the environment.
Well, I just have to pause. I mean, I think I've had enough. I'm just going to make a point here. I don't know who we are electing to these legislative bodies. Please fire them. I think all members of public I don't even believe any one of them have read these laws.
This law is actually only one sentence, so this one they might have read. But
Yeah, right.
The point is taken.
I'm like, please, if for anything out of this record, I'm going to highly make the public take a look at who we are electing.
Even the artist
I already
housing.
looked up who wrote the last one.
The state legislature.
called
And I can say
registering,
the name is from our local jurisdiction,
Yeah.
our representative. Please take a look at this.
Register and vote.
The authors of the bill and UC Berkeley said that residential noise should be addressed through the code enforcement process and not the CEQA process. The bill also created a special rule for public universities. If they're building housing and they do an EIR, they don't need to analyze alternate locations for that
Is that about People's Park, that nightmare? Never mind. No, I know there was.
Actually, yes, that's
Okay,
where
that's
it
what I
was.
thought.
Yes. Finally, one more. Just a few words about a bill restricting demolition. I think that's the demolition of the Bastille. But this is about demolition of housing, and it's not a major change in the law because there were already several laws regulating demolition. The Housing Crisis Act of 2019 already required a housing developer to replace any dwellings demolished as a part of constructing a new housing project. And any protected units, meaning units that were income restricted or occupied by low-income persons, would have to be replaced with affordable units. So this bill sort of puts them all in one place and strengthens them a bit. All development projects now, not just residential, must replace demolished dwelling units. And that also includes any units that were demolished within the last 5 years. So a developer comes in, buys a property, and a year ago there were units on it that had been demolished. That developer, when he wants to build, is going to have to replace the units that were demolished. Demolished protected units, just like I said before, units that were restricted to lower income or were occupied by lower income persons, have to be replaced by affordable units. And for non-residential developments, replacement units have to be developed prior to or concurrently with the non-residential project. So that's the main change in this law now. A non-residential developer will have an obligation to build residential units if the site that they acquire demolishes residential units. One exception to that is in an industrial zone, if there are demolished units that were legal non-conforming, then those don't have to be replaced. But otherwise, this requires replacement.
So just don't demolish the building. Oh,
An
Lord.
elegant solution.
Let it go to blight. Okay, never mind.
That brings us to our conclusion. Thank you for putting up with me tonight. If you have any questions about any of the bills we discussed.
No, we don't. We're just waiting for the layoff notice for Planning Commission now after this. But thank you again, Xander. It's always enlightening to hear all of the changes and shifts in tide. I think I've made my comment earlier for the record, so I won't belabor it. But we are where we are, and the interest is to build more housing. Well, someday if they start touching, well, I'll take 4 data center applications to this study session. But appreciate all your effort in educating us, bringing to awareness all of the current laws as the tides shift. More and more housing is the impetus and goals. I hope California at some time recognizes where it's headed. Thank you so much. Moving to the next order of items, we have, I think, announcements.
The lawyer.
No. I was kidding, Commissioner Salem.
So if I wanted to build a 5-story building made up of single studio units on my residential property in the cul-de-sac, those laws allow me to do that if they're all affordable, right?
Well, if you wanted to do that, I would counsel you to think hard on it. But single-family zones are still somewhat single-family. You could build up to 4 units on your property if you used SB 9 from a couple years ago. But I don't know how with a single-family lot.
Yeah, I was looking at the density, maximum density with infinite everything and all the other combined characteristics. It sounded like, and I'm hoping you're going to tell me I'm wrong, it sounded like I can get away with pretty much anything as long as they're all affordable.
Well, the ones where you can ignore the zoning, those include the religious land. Also, I think the adaptive reuse. So if there was already a building that was 5 stories on your property, you could reuse it for that purpose. But there's still no right to put a 5-story multifamily dwelling on a single-family lot as of today.
So I need to start the Enlightened Church of Lego on my land?
No, because the religious exemption only applies to religious institutions that owned
Registered before
property prior to January 1st, 2024. So the legislature actually thought about this, people rushing to buy, church property and then getting out of any sort of zoning. They actually said, no, it's only for existing property that you own.
Good, thank you very much for reassuring me.
And I don't want the media to quote me that I said anybody should be fired, but thank you again. Do we need to take a motion to accept the study
Not at
session?
all.
Or are we good?
Let's never speak of this again.
Thank you on a stormy night, trying to get us out here. Reports of Commission Board Liaison Committee members and announcements and other items. I'll just go and say thank you again to staff for yesterday's City Council meeting and dinner. Totally very well organized, and it was a very productive session. Thank you to our commission members who have dedicated time and effort and got more than one meeting associated with it. So thank you. Commissioner travel and training reports, request to attend trainings. I think we have the travel policy also attached by, Elizabeth gave us a,
Yeah, I sent that to everyone today so you could take a look at the travel policy and the guidelines. So you have that information. And then we have this item on the agenda tonight about the APA National Planning Conference that's coming up April 13th through the 16th in Minneapolis. And the information is on the RTC that's on the agenda. So we could take a vote today if anyone would like to attend and in accordance with the policy.
so just highlighting that because the APA conference is in Minneapolis, it's considered out of state, and no more than 2 members of the city commission may attend any specific out-of-state conference or training event. So if there is an interest, then we have to determine if the interest is more than 2, then who to go.
Sure. And then, of course, there is the online option also for this. I know it's not something everyone likes to do, but there is that also.
Understood. Any interest? Okay. Elizabeth, for now, can we make the ability for 2 commissioners to attend? We have interest from myself as well as Commissioner Biagini.
Okay.
We can confirm as it comes from the specific dates, if it can be basically take the vote today to approve no more than 2 members.
Sure, and to expend the funds.
And
then we can
to
get
expend the
working on it.
funds.
Sure.
We'll confirm our schedule for more via email to you.
Okay, that sounds
you.
good, sure. Do what?
Do I need to get my insurance policy out?
I think you do.
Especially when you look at those
Okay.
data centers as you fly over.
All right, we are scratching that from the record, but thank you. All right, so no more than 2 members, and of interest is Commissioner Biagini and Commissioner, myself, Chirukuru.
I'm interested in the remote.
Okay.
So the motion and second, who's motioned? Oh, Commissioner Salem is interested?
Only in the remote.
For the remote.
Oh, I see. Okay. Great, thank you. We will put you down for the online. Anybody else interested in attending online? Okay. Thank
Yes or
you.
no?
So
That
we
was it?
have
Okay.
interest from 2 commissioners to travel in person and 1 person taking interest online. We will confirm with the budget for a motion.
Okay.
Is there information yet on the time zone delta? In other words, are they going to start their sessions at 6 a.m. time?
Good point.
Yeah, I don't have that information. I'll let you know as soon as
I think the online dates are different.
Are they? Oh, okay, good.
I'd like to make the motion to expend the funds to attend the APA National Conference for no more than 2 commissioners, since we have 2 that are interested. That's live and in person, and for 1 commissioner to do the online version.
Okay.
We have a motion. I'd like a second.
Seconded.
We have a motion by Commissioner Biagini, second by Commissioner Bhatnagar. Thank you, staff, for bringing that travel policy as well. Moving to Director of Community Development.
Did you want to take the vote?
Oh, sorry. I thought we did. I thought I was done. I got the approval.
I shut my
Where is it?
computer, so I'm a yes.
Nancy, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. The motion passed. Thanks.
Thank you again, everyone. Director of Community Development reports. Commission
There-
budget?
Yeah, there's no items to report. Oh, commission budget, sorry. Now I'm going fast.
Would you,
We're all tracking. Okay, I think with our budget, we'll get updated next time when we have the
I
actual.
have it for you right now. Your balance right now is 14,872. So you have plenty of funds for the conference and any other training opportunities.
Thank you. And again, getting an overwhelming support yesterday from City Council, and possibly even increasing the budget gave us a little hope that education is a priority. So I will take the lazy effort of going all the way to Minneapolis.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Staff, I believe last year when the housing element was being presented to the state, I understand that it has not yet been, let's say, approved or accredited, but I think the commission here did request that on an annual basis, we would go and get a report from staff as to how we were doing with respect to the numbers that we've submitted. So while the numbers have not been, let's say, accredited, but we have a plan, so how are we doing against those numbers? I mean, 1 year has gone by of that 8-year plan. What's the status?
Right,
Going by Commissioner Critchlow's metrics idea, right?
Yeah, we report to the state. Our report's due to them every April. So that is a report that does go to council, but that is something that I could present to you as well in April.
That'll be great. Just the highlights, right? How are we doing?
Yeah.
And just on that same wavelength, do we know when the housing element is going back to, or is it in the state right now?
We're hoping to have a new version that we can bring to the Planning Commission and City Council within the next couple of months. We still haven't gotten HCD's informal buy-off on that. Once we get, direction from HCD that it's a good chance that we'll get certified, then we'll bring it to Planning Commission. But it has to be formally adopted and go to Planning Commission and Council before we can submit it. And then HCD has 60 days to review it before they have to make a certification decision. But we certainly want this to be the last time that we have to submit to them, so we want to get it right before we do it.
Attempts a charm. Upcoming agenda items. So we have sometime in the future housing element, but any known?
Yeah.
Any other items that you know of, Leslie?
Nothing
Okay.
of note to report.
We did not get any confirmation on the continuance that happened for the 4 generators?
No, we have not heard back from the applicant on when they would like to bring that
Wow,
forward.
talk about someone just poof. City council actions, yesterday's dinner, but any other night activity?
Yeah, there are no reportable actions from the city council since they last met. Yes, no planning items.
Okay, with that, I'm looking for a unanimous.
No objection.
9:42, meeting adjourned. Motion, consensus.